This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with James O'Brien.
Good morning. It's 3 minutes after 10 and I don't know what to do. I don't know where to start today. It's not a phone-in, is it, in the traditional sense? It's not a sort of 50-50 or a 52-40. Anyone want to give me a ring and defend Rishi Sunak? 0345 606 0973. It's a Gobi Desert. Nobody would do that, except perhaps that young man on Question Time last night describing all the benefits of Brexit. That was a moment. I'll play that to you later. Fiona Bruce asks the Question Time audience whether or not anybody here thinks Brexit is going well, and one person puts his hand up. There's a little bit of me, when I watched the clip, because it's way past my bedtime, as you know, there's a little bit of me that thought, is he going to be a Mickey taker? And I couldn't say for sure that he wasn't a Mickey taker until towards the end of his comments when it became pretty clear that he meant them. So that's what, if I did a phone-in today on Give Me a Ring Now. Isaac Levido, are you listening? Narissa Chesterfield, I'm told, is the name of Rishi Sunak's Director of Communications. Guess where she used to work? Go on, have a guess. Yep, Institute of Economic Affairs. You couldn't make this stuff up, could you? Someone should write a book about it. So, Eddie, who else is over there in that department? Director of Communications that you're going to have. You'd rather have prison on your CV, wouldn't you, than Director of Communications for Rishi Sunak? Sorry, what were you doing between 2021 and 2024? I was running the Jimmy Savile fan club. Oh, okay, yeah. I mean, that's quite an odd admission to make on your CV, but it's better than what I was actually doing. What were you doing between that period there? I was in prison. What for? Torturing puppies. Okay, right. Yeah, there it is. There we go. So give me a ring now if you want to defend Rishi Sunak. 0345 606 0973 is the number. I'm joking. It's never going to happen. Should we open Idiot's Corners early? I think we should. I get it open early. Steve's been in touch. 3 guesses what O'Brien will be pretending to be outraged about. If Steve was a journalist, which is unlikely because he's barely literate, then he today would be doing something like, is it really as bad? Is it really as bad as some people are claiming? Is that you reach a point in proceedings where you simply can't defend or justify what's gone on, but your scarf is tied so tightly around your neck that you cut off the supply of blood to your head. So you have to come out with some desperate attempt to distract attention from or to focus attention elsewhere when the entire world knows exactly how awful something is. So the question can't be, how bad was this? The question can't be, does anybody want to defend Rishi Sunak? What can the question be? There's only one thing that interests me this morning. And that is this. What the hell happened? Any Hamilton fans in the house? Do you like Hamilton? In the room where it happens, which is one of my favourite songs from one of my favourite musicals, in the room where it happens, Aaron Burr, sir, is furious about never being in the room where it happens. His nemesis, Alexander Hamilton, is always in the room where it happens. And in the room where it happens, what the hell happened? What happened? How could this conversation have unfolded? How could this situation have been allowed to transpire? There are even reports, and it started on a website that I'm not familiar with. I checked, actually. Ian Dale was in the studio, in the office this morning. Lovely to see him back in the building. And Ian, of course, is a man who knows a thing or two about stuttering campaigns. And I checked with him, this source, it's a website called Reaction Life. And they ran a story claiming that Tory sources had told them that originally Rishi Sunak wasn't going to go to Normandy at all. And I have to be honest with you, you may have picked up over the years that I'm not a major fan of this particular iteration of the Conservative Party. But that's why I checked with Ian. I said, is this a reputable organisation? And apparently it's run by a Times columnist who I've always found to be fairly hideous. But he is, I suppose, if he's got a column in the Times, he's somebody who you'd have to acknowledge is quotes, respectable, end quotes, in the context of the broader media. And so Ian said, yeah, they're pretty, you know, they're pretty straight up, they're a pretty stand-up organisation, and they reported that the French government was told a week ago that Rishi Sunak would not attend the D-Day 80th commemoration. Tory sources have confirmed, reports this website. They've already They've already pushed back on this at Downing Street, but they would have to, wouldn't they? They're hardly going to confirm it, and they can't not deny it. So, I mean, you know what they say, a lie, if it is a lie, can be halfway around the world before the truth has got its trousers on. And speaking of lies, for me, the most extraordinary element, and to think I was worried I wouldn't have much to say, the most extraordinary element, and today is a day when I will be using the word extraordinary an extraordinary amount of times. The most extraordinary element of this entire conversation is the thing that he ducked out of D-Day commemorations for. Joking aside, and thank you for everybody who's already been in touch to say that you've already had a bit of a giggle this morning. This is the point about politics when it gets like this. You've got to look for the bright side. You've got to look for the funnies, up to a point, Lord Copper. But all joking aside, I presumed there would be some sort of family crisis. I wasn't really paying attention. But when I saw Cameron's pie face on my telly next to Joe Biden, Olaf Scholz and Emmanuel Macron, the Chancellor of Germany turned up and the UK Prime Minister didn't. Before I'd sort of logged on, as it were, I was at the Garden Centre, if you're interested. Again, I love I'm going through, you can tell how middle-aged I've become now. I spent half my life in the Garden Centre. Before I logged on properly, I saw that photograph. I presumed that something quite significant had happened. So either family crisis or national security. Because the circumstances in which the Prime Minister, I'm looking at the picture now, I still can't believe it. David Cameron, Emmanuel Macron, Olaf Scholz, Joe Biden. Two presidents and a chancellor, and then a foreign secretary, who really only has that gig because Rishi Sunak promoted him into the House of Lords as a reflection of the shallowness of the talent puddle from which he appoints his cabinet. And the detail, as it began to emerge, beggared belief, didn't it? I mean, it's an interview. I'm a big fan of Paul Brand, but I wouldn't come back from a D-Day ceremony to be interviewed by Paul Brand, and I'm just a gob on a stick. I'm not the Prime Minister. Big fan of Paul Brand on ITV. Looking forward to seeing the interview itself. But that's what they prioritised. That's the conversation they had in the room where it happens. What's happened? And then we're coming away early. We're coming away. What's happening tomorrow? Just run me through my itinerary, will you, Isaac, or Narissa? Well, just talk me through my itinerary. Yeah, okay. So we're going to D-Day. We'll go to the British ceremony, and then we're coming home. We're coming. What about? Isn't there usually an international one? Didn't I see? I'm sure I saw Margaret Thatcher with other world leaders. The German Chancellor didn't used to go for reasons that I hope are fairly obvious. So it didn't. I see Margaret Thatcher. I'm sure I saw Margaret Thatcher and with all the other leaders, and Tony Blair as well. I'm sure I saw Tony Blair at the various other ceremonies, the various other anniversaries, the 50th, the probably the 75th. I don't know how big that was. Certainly the 20th. Isn't there a ceremony for all the international? Yeah, there is, but we're not going to that. Why? Well, we've got to get back to London to pre-record an interview with ITV that won't be broadcast for a week because we think it's really important that you double down on the lies that you told in the leaders' debate that have been shown to be lies by the Permanent Secretary to the Treasury and the Office of National Statistics, the former of whom actually told you that you shouldn't make the point that you made because it wasn't true. But here you are, flying back early from a D-Day commemoration to double down on the lie that you've already been busted for telling. Oh, and while we're at it, aren't you the bloke who says that young people should be doing national service? So how did this happen? How did this happen? What do you think? There's plenty of room on the switchboard today for you to just splutter disgustedly about what's gone on and how awful it is. But I'd like a little bit of context. I'd like to know why you particularly find this so obnoxious. For the record, I don't think, I'm not going to tie my scarf around my neck as tightly as old Steve there. For the record, I don't think that Rishi Sunak is contemptuous of D-Day veterans. I don't think he feels the gratitude to that generation any less keenly than I do, or you do, or any of the world leaders that were there do. I really don't. I don't think this is indicative of callousness, contempt, or even carelessness in that very specific context. I don't know what political capital others will try to make of it, but I don't think it would be fair to accuse him of not caring about the fallen or about the surviving soldiers of D-Day. I just don't. You can disagree with me about that. You know me, my compassion is my curse, as Prince Andrew once famously observed. So the conversation in the room would not involve anybody saying, oh, it doesn't really matter, it's only D-Day. Would it? We don't. No one actually is going to reach for that today. No one's going to say they had a conversation about what was. But then you have to think, well, what did they have a conversation about? Because somebody somewhere decided that it was more important to come back to pre-record an interview with ITV in which you would double down on lies that have already been blown sky high by qualified experts and contributors to the actual story. And nobody said, I don't think we can do that, lads. This is the bit I can't get past. Even if your director of communications used to work at the Institute of Economic Affairs, there must be somebody in the building who would say, oh, come on. No, we can't come back early. Schulz is, the German Chancellor is going to be, the Germans are going to be there. I sound like Stan Boardman now. That's quite a niche reference for older listeners. The Germans are going to be there. But we're not. We could send Davy Cameron. Do you think Cameron had anything to do with it? Do you think Cameron's ego is so immense that he sort of went, oh, don't worry, I'm a former Prime Minister and I'm Foreign Secretary. I'm a bloody Lord, for goodness sake. Lord Cameron, look at me. Hey, I'll pop along. No, they'll be none the wiser. It's just as respectful. I'm a former Prime Minister. I'm David Cameron. I'm a Lord. And Sunak, who hasn't been doing this very long, when, oh, okay, well, I mean, if David Cameron thinks it's all right, then, I mean, otherwise that means David Cameron didn't say to Rishi Sunak, do you know what, mate, I really think you should postpone the pre-recorded interview with ITV and go to the ceremony. So even David Cameron, I don't know why I'm saying even David Cameron, the man's a balloon, but even David Cameron didn't say, you have to presume, because if he did, phone lines are open, Big D, 0345 6060 973. If he did say it, he'd surely want it out there that he was in the room where it happens and he pointed out to everybody else that this was not a very good idea. So David Cameron is complicit now. David Cameron is part of the problem. He didn't say to Rishi, what's that? You want me to stand in for you? You want me to stand in between the American president and the German chancellor? I'm not even elected, mate. No, he didn't. He didn't say that. So, what do you think happened in the room where it happened? 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. And I think he's a phrase you won't hear spring from my lips very often. I almost feel sorry for Nick Ferrari this morning. Because Nick Ferrari has a junior minister, admittedly not one that anyone had heard of, except perhaps his mum, before today, someone called David something, a junior minister with responsibility for children not knowing how much child benefit is. Now that, in normal times, that's like loaf of bread, pint of milk territory. And a politician who has been so insufficiently briefed on their own purview, their own sphere of interest, even if it isn't necessarily their specific ministerial responsibility, that would be a lovely little headline grabber in normal circumstances. So I almost feel sorry for Nick Ferrari having his thunder stolen by Rishi Sunak's catastrophic conduct, which remains to me, and this is the point that I keep coming back to, I genuinely find it incomprehensible. I cannot understand how this happened. Can you? 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. Because apart from our friend Steve, it is impossible, I think, to exaggerate how awful this is. You know? I mean, some of us indulge in probably irrational, dewy-eyed nostalgia on some matters military, but not D-Day. Not D-Day. Not the exercise that changed the course of the war. If it hadn't happened, the Nazis probably wouldn't have won, but the Russians would have arrived in Berlin on their own, and God knows how Europe would have been carved up as a consequence of that. So D-Day's historical significance is extraordinary. The sacrifice, both actual and potential, was I remember those words I told you yesterday when Clementine Churchill came to say goodnight to her husband. And he said to her on the night of the 5th, he said, "Do you know that 20,000 men could be dead by this time tomorrow?" And Sunak came home early. And I can't, for the life of me, work out why. It's 10:18.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 20 minutes after 10, and it is a question for the ages. How could this have happened? Ray is in Southampton. Ray, what do you reckon?
Well, it puzzles me because he must have had to discuss something with Cameron before he stood in for him.
Yes.
So what advice could have come from Cameron? And if the advice was go and do it, what would be behind that? And the other possible source of advice would be his so-called special advisors, who generally are young people who've never had a proper job. And
how dare you say that? His director of communications used to work at the Institute of Economic Affairs.
Exactly.
What do you mean exactly? That's an august organisation with a season ticket for the BBC, LBC, ITV and the Daily Mail.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the demographic, apparently, that doesn't know much about D-Day and wouldn't understand...
Well, I don't know that that's fair, but you're reiterating my puzzlement, Ray. You're not bringing salve and solution to the table.
Well, no, but we'll have to see what happens with Cameron, won't we?
Well, whether he actually says, I told him not to... I don't think he can do that.
No. Whether he's going to be set up to be the next Tory leader.
I see what you mean. I think we've got enough to puzzle over today without bringing in new wrinkles and conspiracies. But someone's going to have to do the job if things carry on like this, and the scale of the defeat seems close to what the polls suggest. But how could it have happened? And I think that Ray's suggestion, mischievous though it is that Cameron may have been setting Sunak up for a fall to make his own passage back to the leadership easier. And of course, in the absence of an explanation, anything is free to move into the vacuum created. Peter's in Barnet. Peter, what do you think?
Hello, James. Sorry first time I've ever spoken to you, actually, James. But I must say I do disagree with you, James.
What?
On the fact that you said that you know as well as I do that Rishi Sunak is a very, very intelligent man.
No, I don't. I don't know that. Hang on a minute. I'll tell you. I know he's a very rich man, and I know that we generally consider it to be very difficult to make an awful lot of money unless you've got some brains. To which I usually respond with 3 words: Jacob, Rees, and Mog. All right. So intelligent. Emotional literacy, emotional intelligence, intellect, all of these things. But yeah, I'll give you the benefit of the doubt. He's sharp.
James. I get your point. I'm just saying, well, I class him as a fairly intelligent man. He cannot have misunderstood what it was all about yesterday. He shows utter and absolute contempt for the people who went on the beaches that day.
Do you really think so?
Oh, absolutely.
And
without a doubt.
That's absolutely irredeemable. Irredeemable.
Utterly. And he's opened the door for reform completely. Now, I will say one thing, James.
I think it might be a timely moment to remember that in Michael Crick's biography of Nigel Farage, a former school friend reported how he used to make pro-Nazi comments and talk about, and forgive me, a trigger alert here perhaps necessary, that he would sing about gassing the Jews. So although you're quite right that Farage will take this as an opportunity to burnish his own patriotic credentials, the history suggests that he wouldn't be acting entirely honestly, and I recommend that Michael Crick biography. But yeah, I mean, obviously it leaves the door open for opportunism. And
absolutely. Can I say one more thing, though, James?
You can say 5 more things if you want, Peter.
It will not make any difference to who I vote for. I will still vote Labour.
Yes, that doesn't shock me. You said that as if I was going to be surprised. If you'd said I will still vote Monster Raving Loony Party, then you may have actually taken some of the wind out of my sails. But
James, a friend of mine is a candidate as a Monster Raving Loony Party against Rishi Sunak in Richmond, North Yorkshire.
And I now have to remind everybody listening, and here is one I didn't see coming. Here is a full list of candidates in Richmond, North Yorkshire is available at lbc.co.uk/candidate. So just to clarify, Peter, I'm not going to argue the toss with you on this today because...
He's disappointed in me that I'm voting Labour, you see, as well.
I see what you mean. Yeah. But so you genuinely think that this couldn't have happened unless the status of the D-Day veterans and the importance of the D-Day commemoration was somehow lower in Rishi Sunak's contemplations than it is in yours and mine and almost everybody else.
James, any right-thinking person will think that.
Wow.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I think it's...
I mean, I'm not here to fly distraction for Rishi Sunak or to try and help him out, but that is a huge accusation that I've got to tell you, looking at my inbox, almost all of you are agreeing with Peter. I just can't buy it. I just can't see how a Prime Minister, even if he did think that, I can't see how there would be nobody in the room where it happens to drag him back, to pull him down, to just say, you can't come home early. You cannot come home early. And nobody did. Russ is in Bangor in Northern Ireland. Russ, what would you like to say?
Morning, James.
Hello, Russ.
Some of us aren't giggling this morning, to be honest. I know you said it, and I know it was part of your monologue, and I appreciate it. I know the context of it, but to some context of what I'm about to say, when Boris and his friends were partying in Downing Street, I was saying goodbye to my father over an iPhone as he died of COVID.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Take your time.
Then they made all these excuses. Then all the truth came out.
So this speaks to you, these events speak to you of a similar contempt.
And I'll tell you why. I'll tell you exactly why. Then Boris went. Hallelujah.
Yes.
The day that Rishi Sunak came to power, he said it was going to be different.
He did.
And although Keir's been talking all about the chaos of the Tories, I want to talk about the callousness and the contempt of the Tories. Because there are thousands of us, hundreds of thousands of us, that experienced that during COVID. And what Rishi did yesterday, and let me tell you, I own businesses and I have people who make decisions for me all the time. But if somebody puts something like that in my diary, and it happens all the time,
I'm sure
I would know about it. And I would say, sorry, that's a red line I can't cross.
That's the bit, right, that we can't get past. Or maybe you can. You get past it with callousness and contempt, I think.
Well, no, you normalise. I've read your book about how we broke Britain, fantastic book, and I'm not here to advertise for you, but thank you for writing that book.
You're welcome, thank you.
And you get past it by normalising that behaviour.
Yeah.
And the Conservatives have normalised contempt and callousness. And Rishi, this is the old line, isn't there? Same guy, different suit.
Yeah.
And he lied this week 12 times to the British public. And if that wasn't bad enough, yesterday, if he hadn't already got a nail in his coffin, he did it yesterday, because there's so many people, especially in the red wall seats, who are going to look at this and say, that is a bridge too far. You can't treat people like that. And this is what this is about for me. I don't care about statistics in one way of who's going to spend what. I care about if a government cares about the people who vote for them. And the Tories have proved time and again, and Rishi has proved it again, that this government have complete and utter contempt for the people that vote for them.
I think that's a very powerful contribution, and I can't argue with you, especially given the context that you provided at the beginning, for which I offer my undiluted sympathies. But I can't quite accept personally. I mean, I suppose I can't really challenge you unless I can come up with a better explanation. And
there isn't an explanation.
No,
the only explanation is you wrote it in your book at times. They've normalised their behaviour. They think what they do is normal.
But I'm still shocked.
Of course we're all shocked.
Well, yeah, but you're quoting my own analysis back at me as a reason for why a politician has done something. And to be fair, you're right. That is very much what I feel. And you've included the lying as well. But I'm still shocked, even against the backdrop of the normalisation of callousness, moral corruption and abject dishonesty. He didn't have to do this. There's no win in it. So that's the other point, Russ. Is that
can I speak to another moment thing that could explain it as well?
Go on.
It speaks to his leadership as well.
Yeah.
Because at some point, there must have been he must have known what was going to happen yesterday in terms of his diary. And as a leader, He should have pushed back on his comms managers, all the people saying, "Hey, Rishi, you're doing
just so
this,
obvious
this,
to you and to me and to most people. Anybody with experience of command chains or structures would just..."
Yes, there are points. I had a situation in my business this week where I got an email that dropped in my inbox where some of my people had made the wrong decision. At that moment, I left my team meeting and went on fixing it straight away and putting it right. Because I am flabbergasted he did it, but I'm not surprised. Let me put it like that.
Nicely put. Nicely put. I mean, flabbergasted or shocked, but not surprised is a bit of a phrase for this era of British politics. Russ, thank you, mate. Thank you for that. It is 10:30. Thomas Watts has your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
Political paranoia kicking in once again. I'm going to read you the full list of declared candidates for the Richmond and Northallerton constituency in the general election 2024. As far as we're aware, Rishi Sunak is standing for the Conservatives, Tom Wilson for Labour, Daniel Callaghan for the Liberal Democrats, Kevin Foster for the Green Party and Lee Taylor for Reform UK. That's all I've got. But I think there's still time. I think it's today is when nominations close. So we shall see, or it may be that... Anyway, a few of you pointing out that he issued his apology on Twitter, or X, as Elon Musk calls it. I don't know whether I agree with you about that compounding the problem. I mean, I don't see how the apology can compound the offence. I would like to see politicians apologise more, but only if they mean it. And they never do, really. I'm very sorry I got caught. It's like being 10 years old. I'm very, very sorry I got caught. I'm very sorry. So you can take it to an extremity, like Boris Johnson did. And, you know, I used to tell you a story about going to a pick-your-own-strawberry farm when I was about 6. And I couldn't believe it. It was the first time I'd been to one. And I couldn't believe it. You could eat all the strawberries. You could literally just walk up around. And you didn't have to stay with your mum and dad. You could wander off on your own and eat all the strawberries. And so I did. And then I came back to the weighing station to meet mum and dad. And I had a few strawberries in my punnet. And I took them to the farmer. And the farmer said to be weighed. And the farmer said, "Did you eat any strawberries?" I went, "No." And everyone in the farm, it sounds like one of those stories, doesn't it, now this way? And the whole bus started laughing. But literally everybody in the little tent started laughing. And I didn't realise why at the time. I quite enjoyed it, you know. I thought it was being entertaining or something. It turns out I was covered in strawberry juice, like my face, my shirt, absolutely I'd gone in there like one of Oliver Twist's mates at the workhouse. I'd just filled my face with strawberries to a frankly disgusting degree. And what Boris Johnson did was that, but he did it in Parliament. He goes, you'd say to Boris Johnson, "Have you been eating any strawberries?" And he'd be there, covered in strawberry juice, like bright red juice everywhere, right down his front, dripping on his shoes. "I have no, what an inverted pyramid of I have never seen what is a strawberry? Strawberum vulgaris. I have never eaten a strawberry in my life," he would say. And he turned that into normal. So I don't think that an apology per se is necessarily progress, but I don't know that an apology can compound an offence unless the fact that it has been issued on a social media platform rather than in a recorded message, so you could see the whites of his eyes. He's more than welcome to pop in here and do it properly and answer questions. Only about this issue. So I'd even on this occasion say, "I won't ask you about all the lies that you've told. I just want to talk about why you came back. How did it happen, Prime Minister? How did it happen?" So I don't know. I'll read you it in full, though. I think that's only fair. The 80th anniversary of D-Day has been a profound moment to honour the brave men and women who put their lives on the line to protect our values, our freedom and our democracy. This anniversary should be about those who made the ultimate sacrifice for our country. The last thing I want is for the commemorations to be overshadowed by politics. I care deeply about veterans and have been honoured to represent the UK at a number of events in Portsmouth and France over the past 2 days and meet those who fought so bravely. After the conclusion of the British event in Normandy, I returned back to the UK. On reflection, it was a mistake not to stay in France longer, and I apologise. I wonder whether he could have just issued the final paragraph, because the bit about the last thing I want is for the commemorations to be overshadowed by politics, when you were coming back from the commemorations to double down on lies that you'd already told about your political rivals, that to me does actually compound the problem. Just that paragraph, those two sentences there. This anniversary should be about those who made the ultimate sacrifice for our country. And then doesn't add, but I decided to prioritise politics over that by coming home early to pre-record an interview so that I could double down on lies I've already been busted for by the Office of National Statistics and the Chief Secretary, Permanent Secretary to the Treasury. So I don't know, but the final paragraph I think is apt and appropriate. On reflection, it was a mistake not to stay in France longer, and I apologise. Which brings us back to the question we've been asking this morning, which I suppose is, how could they not have done that reflection sooner? What on earth happened in that room? What was the conversation? And remember, David Cameron is part of it. So the fact that he's surrounded by 12-year-olds who used to work for lobby groups masquerading as think tanks, or people who made their reputations peddling big lies in various elections and referendums doesn't. I mean, Cameron. I'm no fan of David Cameron, as our last caller will know. He gets an entire chapter in how they broke Britain, and in many ways, it's the most important chapter because it sets the scene for so much of what has followed since 2010. But he is perceived as being elsewhere on the scale of awfulness from Boris Johnson, his old school pal, and I suppose latterly Rishi Sunak. Sunak brings Cameron back in the hope of creating an air of competence, or at least of experience. So Cameron, there you go, that's the word. Cameron is at least experienced, even if he's awful. He's experienced, even if his combination of hubris and arrogance has more to do with Britain being on its knees today than certainly any other previous prime minister. How could he have let it happen? So who's in that room? And how could none of them have said, look, right, you need Alistair Campbell, don't you, or Malcolm Tucker? Someone's going, just shut up, all of you, just shut up. You're not going back to Britain. Prime Minister, you're just not, just lock him in the cupboard. It's Armando Iannucci couldn't write this. That's not fair. He could. Probably did. There was an episode of Yes, Prime Minister that was almost word for word the national service suggestion that Rishi Sunak came out with a couple of weeks ago. But how could there be nobody in that room who would just go, handcuff him to the radiator? He's going you cannot go back. It's bloody D-Day. The German Chancellor's going to be there. Joe Biden's going to be there. Emmanuel flipping Macron's going to be there. We're not sending pie-faced Cameron. You're the Prime Minister. It's your job. You've got... And no one did this. And if they did, they got ignored. And I cannot... And I'm not one of those people that spends his life ear deep in Westminster. I don't have any politician friends, and I don't go to dinner parties where all the lobby journalists swap anecdotes about so-and-so and the spads break bread with the journal. I hate all that. I just don't do it. But I do follow events quite closely. And I write about them. I don't just blather about them to you every day. When you write about them, you've got to think about them. You can't just open your gob and wait to see what comes out. Like it may sometimes appear I do on the radio. I cannot conceive of how this happened. Alex is in Tooting. Can you?
Well, I have a theory, James.
We love a theory, Alex.
You can shoot it down if you like.
Certainly.
So you've mentioned obviously this publication saying that a week ago the French thought that actually he was not going to turn up at all.
Yes.
So that's quite interesting. But actually, I think you need to go further back than that. Mr. Sunak himself called the election.
Correct.
So actually, that was a week or so before that.
Yes.
So actually, as part of that process, he would have seen all those, in deciding that date, he would have seen all the things that were coming up. So he must have known.
It's fair to say, isn't it, that you can't be taken by surprise by an anniversary that has been 80 years in the making.
Exactly so. And, so that's the thing. So actually, the decision was made probably a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
And I want to look at why that decision was possibly made.
Go on.
So he basically, I think they had a discussion about optics at that point, and I think in order to shore up his isolationist Brexiteer, I know you love the word, support, I think they consciously decided for him not to be seen to have any dealings with any European leaders.
I mean,
it's quite interesting because actually, of course, he attended the British ceremony in Portsmouth and stayed there all day and all the rest of it. But the moment it becomes international and particularly European, he's out of there as quick as he possibly can.
Well, I mean, this is the vacuum into which theories can move, isn't it? And I would like to push back against your theory, but it requires a conviction that they're not all as mad as a box of frogs. And unfortunately, the evidence points towards the conclusion that actually they are. We can't be.
I don't believe they've revisited their optics strategy since the date of the election was announced.
We don't want to be. We're not going to be knocking about with Macron and Schulz during an election campaign. Whether that story is true or not, they weren't planning on going at all. But it's such, and this is what it involves, Alex. And I don't know that I've got the confidence to say this can't have happened, because I haven't got an alternative analysis. But it means that everybody in that pod has utterly failed to understand something that I think is actually beyond obvious. The sanctity in which World War II veterans in general and D-Day in particular is held by almost the entire population. That misjudgment still beggars belief, although I have to tell you my inbox has a lot of support for your theory.
But I'd also say, actually one of your earlier callers talked about contempt for the voters, and yes. I think actually, I'm sorry, but this actually displays exactly that. I think they're in a complete bubble, and they don't understand.
Being anti-Europe is the most important thing for the Brexiteer mindset. Anthony is endorsing your theory here, Alex, and add to that, I mean, if we were to be ungenerous, we would talk about a complete contempt for voters. But that doesn't quite work because they need votes. So it is an absolute disconnect. It's an almost preternatural failure to understand the concerns and the experiences, even the lived experience, the attitudes of normal voters. That's all, normal people, innocent men, normal men. It's just gone. There's nothing there. Nobody sat there and said we can't do. I can't believe that. Still, nobody said we can't do. You can't go home, man.
Yeah.
Well, I like your theory.
Shameful and politically inept, I think.
Shameful and politically inept. Well, you've moved to the top of the list, I think, of theories at the moment, albeit that you have co-opted a couple of elements of previous ones. It's coming up to 10:45. Henry Riley, as you know, has been in Normandy. We thought it might be interesting for him to canvass some opinion from the dwindling band of brothers who are survivors of D-Day, the D-Day veterans who have made their way to Normandy, in some cases despite quite profound health problems. And Henry, I know, has struck up a rapport, as you would expect from such a charming young man, has struck up a rapport with some of them. And we thought it might be interesting to find out what they made of Rishi Sunak's decision to come home early and miss an international commemoration attended by the German Chancellor, the French President, and the President of the United States of America. And Henry will have that report for us shortly after this.
James O'Brien on LBC.
10:48 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Increasingly, it appears there's only really one story in town today, and it is the Prime Minister's currently inexplicable, although there is quite a lot of support coming in for Alex's analysis. If you missed it, I'll share it with you again shortly. But to this moment, inexplicable decision to come home early from D-Day celebrations. And I think the next bit's crucial, in order to pre-record an interview in which he intended to double down on lies that have already been called out by the Permanent Secretary to the Treasury in the Office of National Statistics. Henry Riley is currently at a D-Day commemoration, this time in the French town of Grange, and he has been filing very powerful and often quite moving reports from Normandy all week. We've got a bit of time, Henry, so I got a couple of things I'd like to ask you about. Could we begin with this story and how it percolated through the press pack in Normandy? How the kind of conversation, almost like Chinese whispers, going, Rishi Sunak's gone home early. Did we all know that was going to happen? Was there surprise among the assembled journalists? What was the sort of reaction in the moment?
Well, James, good morning. I think, so firstly, just to lay it out, I was in Vers-sur-Mer yesterday, which is the British ceremony, which Rishi Sunak was at, and then a photo emerged. I think the journalist here assumed that he would be going to the ceremony on Omaha Beach, which of course features President Zelensky, Joe Biden, and then we saw this picture circulating online of Lord Cameron pictured with Olaf Scholz, the German Chancellor, and President Biden. I think there was, at that point, a degree of confusion, and perhaps we thought, as the Foreign Secretary, former Prime Minister, he might be there as well. I have to say, last night, that was sort of the end of it, James. There was no chatter, but this morning, as you referenced, I've got the privilege of spending a lot of time with these veterans at breakfast time and in driving around, and it was brought up at breakfast, and I think that is the first time when the veterans were bringing up this story. Many of them have got sort of British TV in their rooms, and so when they first started hearing that Rishi Sunak wasn't there, they were pretty disappointed, to say the least. I was actually travelling to this ceremony in Grange with 5 veterans, and they asked them about it.
I've lost all faith in him because they're all our fallen.
And you're getting upset about that?
Yeah.
And some of you were telling me earlier you're Conservatives normally, and does this upset you?
This debacle yesterday, that was outrageous.
Yeah.
But, what can you do? It is what it is.
And Tom, RAF veteran, what do you think?
Well, I think he should have stopped there and saw the shore out.
To leave a service early, I think, is very disrespectful, especially for our lost comrades, and the veterans who are at the service must feel a bit let down. I mean, it's just not on.
Yeah.
But I find that's quite a lot with many politicians because they haven't served in the armed forces, so they don't realise the consequences, loss that we feel.
Okay.
Therefore, I think what he did was very, very disrespectful.
And James, if this wasn't already enough of a nightmare for Downing Street, actually the next thing we went to talk about is they were pointing out to me how Keir Starmer and Nigel Farage were in Normandy and were still here. And so I think if they're listening in Downing Street, they'd be quite concerned by that. But then actually, some of them, Conservatives, quite upset by it.
Clearly upset, and understandably so. Volodymyr Zelensky, of course, who is at war at the moment, managed to attend and stay longer than Rishi Sunak. And indeed, in his roundup of his visit to Normandy, Keir Starmer features, and the UK Prime Minister. I actually haven't watched all of it, so I can't say for certain that he doesn't. And this isn't going to go away, Henry, just to sort of put your political correspondent hat on rather than your Normandy correspondent hat. The apology won't really touch the sides of the sort of upset that your new friends just articulated.
No, and I mean the fact the Veterans Minister's come out in the last hour or so saying he can't defend it, Johnny Mercer himself, a military veteran. I think that photograph, James, of Volodymyr Zelensky and Sir Keir Starmer may well prove to be one of the shots of the election.
Before you go, I note on the LBC website a rather powerful dispatch that you've put together featuring your own grandfather. Just push people towards that if you wish.
Oh, thank you, James. Yes, this was my granddad, who retired as a regimental sergeant major, Ronald Robert Horton, landed on D-Day. He served in the 120th Light Anti-Aircraft Regiment of the Royal Artillery, and sadly no longer with us. He died in 2019, but he landed on Gold Beach, D-Day +1. He actually used to fire Bofors guns, 40mm Bofors guns, which meant later in life he was completely deaf because the sheer noise of those guns obviously damaged his hearing. And I have to say, my granddad used to tell us stories frequently about D-Day, and they were very moving. And it's often one of those things, James, where I think 10 years, I wish I'd heard those stories 10 years later.
There goes the phone line. I think we'll get Henry back up at the first opportunity just to get the end of that personal contribution to this international conversation, although you can find out more about Henry's granddad at lbc.co.uk. I'll put out a little tweet of that as well in case you follow me on Twitter at Mr. James OB being my handle. But we will Henry's back. We just lost you at the end there, Henry. We were talking about how you wish that you'd heard these stories more recently.
Yeah, exactly. And so long story short, James, when I found out that he had written something on it, it was, I mean, I sort of knew it was there and I hadn't properly read it. And then I spent a few hours the other day properly reading through it and understanding it. It's now on the LBC website, and it is his first-hand account of the nervousness of being on the, in England, waiting to go to D-Day, his first thoughts when he saw the coast of France, the beaches of France, and of course all the fallen men there. And it's a wonderful account, James. He talks about everything from the food that they managed to smuggle off some dead Germans being rancid, the butter was rancid, and there's some really sort of details in there. And I bought his Legion d'Honneur medal, which is the highest honour in France, to the memorial yesterday, which was a really special moment, and it was overlooking Gold Beach where he landed. And that was special. And then he was in the Royal Artillery, as I mentioned, so I put his medal next to some of the former Royal Artillery soldiers, his colleagues, when I was at the Bayeux War ceremony. So that was a very nice moment.
You've been thinking about him a lot then this week.
Yeah, a lot.
He'd be very proud of you, Henry. It's 10:56. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where we continue to contemplate the failure of the UK Prime Minister to attend the international ceremony commemorating the 80th anniversary of D-Day. Geraldine is in Kingsbury. Geraldine, what would you like to say?
Morning, James. I haven't spoken to you before. I'm nervous, but how can I be nervous after hearing what Henry's just said about his granddad? Yeah. I've always voted Conservative. I've wavered here, there, and everything. But what happened yesterday was such a disrespectful act. No apology can make it good or make it better. I can imagine the meeting in my head. There's all these people with their big titles and big salaries attached, said, oh, well, you could go to that part, you've ticked the box, but come back and do this interview. And like an ordinary dog, he's there saying, yes, okay, I'll come back and do it. Own it.
It's not just the meeting, is it? Because as Alex pointed out, this stuff has been, it hasn't been in the diary for 80 years, obviously, but because Rishi Sunak hasn't been alive for 80 years, but we've known for 80 years when the 80th anniversary of D-Day would be, and they knew when the election was called that this would fall in the middle of it. There's some suggestion.
When the 70th was, and the 60th was,
yes,
and
of course. It's not exactly an ambush, is it?
So in stone, like the cenotaph. What would you do at the cenotaph? Oh, show them the face. Oh, right, 2 minutes 11. But I'm going. Bye-bye. It's disrespectful.
So it's millions of meetings. It's scheduled meetings, diary meetings, calendar meetings, and then you could just about imagine how their heads are in the clouds a bit. But then they're in Normandy and they're looking at that morning schedule. They say, I can't go home early. Nobody said you can't go home early.
It's the kind of thing, like, we've all gone to parties that we've had to show our faces at and go, that isn't like... There's nothing you can do to make this right. It's wrong on every single level. And it's disrespectful. End of.
And for you, it's a vote changer?
It's a vote changer. My future son-in-law's in the Royal Navy.
Right.
And when they came back, once we went on to the ship or boat, whatever you call it, and we had to look. And I looked and I seen where they were staying, where the conditions they were staying. You wouldn't put a dog in it. And then you can't go and represent us at a very, very poignant ceremony without going home early. No, so end of.
Not end of. I need one more sentence from you. It's your debut, so I'm going to make the most of it.
I've been listening to you since you used to do the hour interviews. Brian Hayes had this slot years ago.
Yes, that's right. Well, welcome aboard. Better late than never, Geraldine. What do you think?
No, I don't work Friday, so I can listen to it on Friday.
Oh, good. What do you think happened? Genuinely, what do you? How could the calculation possibly have been made?
What I want to say is by stupid people.
Yeah, that's fine.
I teach.
Yeah.
And, people make decisions and you make wrong decisions and you own them. But he's not sitting in a room with one person. There was obviously a group of people who made that decision. And it was like a tick box exercise as far as you've attended the part of it. You'll be okay to go home then. it's wrong. It's just wrong.
Just stupidity. Tin-eared is a phrase that springs to mind. Thank you, Geraldine. I hope we speak again. Alex in Tooting's theory that it's a pulling out of Europe early. It worked so well the last time, didn't it, that they've decided to do it again. It sort of slots into some of the available space. But talking to Geraldine there, the question just assumes a new residence, doesn't it, in a way? What was the calculation? So I think we'll stay with this. And I can tell you now that for the first time since 10 o'clock this morning, there are a couple of phone lines free into the building. So what do you think the calculation was whereby the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom and his top, often very highly paid team of advisors decided to come home early?
James O'Brien on LBC.
3 minutes after 11 is the time, and one of the great things about live radio, of course, is occasionally the sense of momentum gathering while we are on air. And I've explained to you a few times how dangerous it is to have such a horribly biased media in this country, print media, because rightly or wrongly, a lot of broadcast still follows the lead of what is in the early editions of the newspapers. And it was interesting, wasn't it, to hear from Henry Riley, to whom an awful lot of love is being sent in the direction of Normandy for both Henry and his late grandfather, quite rightly. And I've tweeted that extraordinary account by his late grandfather of his experiences on D-Day. It's a historical document. It truly is, and one that I defy you to read without welling up at least a little bit, as I know many of you did during our conversation a few moments ago. Myself, I think, and Henry included. But I talked to you a lot about that for a reason, because you sometimes have to wait. I had a colleague once, and we used to joke that he doesn't know whether it's a story or not until it's been in the Daily Mail. And if it had been in the Daily Mail, then it would become a phone-in topic, which is why sometimes he'd end up doing a phone-in topic a couple of days after other people had, because we'd known it was a story before the Daily Mail got around to reporting, or we were on air when it happened. He doesn't know whether it's a story or not until it's in the Daily Mail. And rarely is that truer than on a day like today, because the Telegraph, the print editions, the early print editions of the Telegraph, of the Mail, even of the Times, as one of their former chief leader writers has pointed out this morning, even the Times didn't go in with it. The Sun inevitably didn't go in with it. And they provided pages of coverage of yesterday's commemorations with nothing on the failure of the Prime Minister to actually put in a full shift. And you can tell that they had time to do so, because the Daily Mirror goes with PM ditches D-Day, military figures fury. Rishi Sunak skipped a major D-Day ceremony in Normandy, then recorded an ITV interview back home. So you come on air at 10 o'clock in the morning and, well, you don't, you tune in. I come on air at 10 o'clock in the morning, and you sometimes you're sometimes a seagull, rarely a trawler, as Eric Cantona would put it. And so, that sense of this being absolutely outrageous has gathered momentum as the morning has unfolded, not just here, but everywhere, right across the country. The early issuing of the apology was a consequence of an interview with a junior minister on Radio 4 this morning, when it became clear what the line of questioning would be for these ministers all day, and possibly even all week. This wasn't going to go anywhere. This is just such an aligning of planets of patriotism, planets of politics, planets of pragmatism, principle, prioritization, an aligning of all of these planets in an incredible moment that I guess if you had to pick a precedent, if you had to find another example, you might cite Gillian Duffy, the woman that Gordon Brown was recorded without realising he still had a lapel mic on, recorded calling a bigot during the 2010 election campaign, holding himself below the waterline on a scale that only Gerald Ratner might fully understand. At the moment, I think this is set to be worse. Brown insulted one woman and arguably everybody else who had believed various nonsenses about immigration. Sunak's insulted not just, he has arguably insulted an entire country here. And it's the country of which he is currently Prime Minister. And as this gathers momentum, as this gathers pace, it becomes a moment of unprecedented political significance. And what's weird about it, even in my mind, is that concept of balance, that idea of offering in good faith an opportunity to say it's not that bad, or an opportunity to say he's being unfairly maligned, or an opportunity to push back against this. And And there isn't any, is there? I mean, I don't know how often that happens. I could have mounted a defence of Gordon Brown on that day because what that lady said about immigration wasn't true. And what he said in private shouldn't have been broadcast or wasn't intended for broadcast. But what I couldn't have done is defend any analysis describing it as catastrophic for his election campaign. This is worse. Because of the question we've been asking all morning, because of the question of what happened in the room where it happened. That question is... what was the calculation? I think we've honed it a bit now. So we'll do that now. What was the calculation? But also, if we take Alex in Tooting's analysis that it has something to do with not wanting to be seen with other European leaders as an example of at least what you could call cogent answer to the question, I'm also interested in the emotional responses for which we turn to Geraldine, the last caller of the last hour. And her contention that this is a vote changer. This is a vote changer. And that then becomes a question. Is this a vote changer for you? 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. A couple of jokes, which I would ordinarily claim the credit for, but in the current circumstances, that would be a little inappropriate. Glenn Mitchell has tweeted, "It's a bit unrealistic to expect teenagers to do a year of national service when today Rishi Sunak couldn't do a full day of it." Quite like that. And my good friend Nick Revell, the comedian and writer, has texted me to say, let's be fair, he has united the whole country, which is a much pithier way of saying what I tried to say 5 minutes ago, is I cannot see anybody. Johnny Mercer reportedly not defending this. The bloke on the radio this morning essentially saying, well, I don't know where he was. I'm just a junior minister. And the apology coming out very soon after. Could have apologised last night, of course. And then you have to wonder whether there is, as we suggested a moment ago, some sort of spread bet in place. He's staked £700 million on losing by a margin even bigger than some of the polls currently suggest. He's doing absolutely everything he can. He's staked his entire fortune on this. If he loses, if the Tories come in on double figures, Rishi Sunak becomes richer than Elon Musk. That's the nature of spread betting. He's absolutely bet the house, I beg your pardon, he's bet all the houses on coming in with a victory even greater than all the polls currently suggest. And he's doing absolutely everything in his power to achieve that. My friend Mark Morris, who is a brilliant historian and writer, his latest book, The Anglo-Saxons, is an absolute masterpiece. He tweeted earlier, he messaged me earlier, he said, I'm genuinely starting to think that Sunak's whole campaign is a Brewster's Millions style hedge fund bet, and he has to lose by some unbelievable margin in order to collect. Yeah, I don't know if you've seen Brewster's Millions. It's a superb film. Richard Pryor at his absolute finest. But you do. These are all slightly tongue-in-cheek, but they're no more absurd, of course, than some of the plausible theories that have been put up in answer to the question of what was the calculation. One more. I don't know if this is Ian's own work or if he's pinched it from someone else, but in the immortal words of Winston Churchill, writes Ian, he left them on the beaches. It's 11:11. Mark's in Collindale. Mark, what do you think?
Oh, morning, James.
Hello, Mark.
There's a lot of powerful stuff in the first hour, wasn't there?
Yes, there was.
Yeah, some of it difficult to listen to. But I'm going to go a slightly different route, but going along with the papers. I got up this morning and I thought, I wonder what the headlines are. So I Googled it and I just couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. I've got the Express here, even the Times, the Mail, and...
They've caught up now. They're on. I have to be clear. Their online editions...
The online may have them.
Are absolutely filling their boots now, which is why I talk about the momentum gathering and this being a moment where you can feel the story growing in real time. But yeah, the decision taken overnight was by the papers you've just listed to almost entirely ignore it.
And quite often I'll watch... Sky News of an evening and see what the papers say, and that's the first thing people would have seen.
Yes.
And if they hadn't heard this story, they wouldn't know about it now if they haven't got the papers or anything. But I think it shows that you look at all the people that are working as SPADs and things, where do a lot of them come from? They come from these newspapers, and they're in their own little bubble, and they think we'll get away with it. The papers won't say anything.
Yeah.
And I don't know. It just goes to show that he really doesn't have his finger on the pulse of the British public.
But this isn't just the pulse of the British public. This is probably the biggest pulse point in British politics, isn't it? D-Day commemoration. I mean, the idea that you don't know what the public mood would be on this issue is actually unbelievable.
It's unfathomable, isn't it?
That's a good word. It's unfathomable. So what do you think the calculation was? You're in the room, and you're right to mention that a lot of the people in that room would have been drawn from precisely the right-wing media. I think one of his top advisors is a former political editor of Andrew Neil's Spectator magazine. You've got people in there from the Institute of Economic Affairs. I mean, so the paucity of quality is part of the problem, but a conversation still happened. So what was the conversation? What was the reason why, let's presume somebody somewhere said, have you thought that maybe we shouldn't stay? And the person, whoever it was, responds to that by saying?
The response can only be, we've got an election to run.
Yeah.
We've got to get our election message out. Nothing else matters.
But it's a pre-record. It's not going out till next week.
Doesn't matter, does it? It was, they'd obviously scheduled it for that time. Therefore, that's what they're doing. That's all they're going on now. They realise they're so far behind in the polls.
We've got to get
all
back.
They've got to get the election
Got to get
message.
back. Got to get the interview out. They've got to double down on this lie. Maybe it's moving the needle. Let's get back. Let's get back to Britain and start lying again.
And can I just say?
No.
Oh, go on, please.
All right.
Okay. One other point about the press. And okay, you can call it whataboutery or whataboutery or whatever. But imagine this the other way if Starmer had gone home. Yeah. Imagine the front pages. You would have the Sun, the Mail, the Express. One word on the front of the papers.
Oh no, traitor.
Traitor, absolutely.
Or something like that. Michael Foot, Jeremy Corbyn, particularly. I mean, more left-wing characters than the current leader. Counterfactuals can be quite unhelpful sometimes, but occasionally they fit like a glove, don't they? And absolutely crucified. Ed Miliband would have been destroyed. They'd already called his dad, who fought. I think his dad was at D-Day, and Paul Dacre's Daily Mail called him the man who hated Britain.
Yeah.
What would they have done if Ed Miliband had come home early? And what did they do when Rishi Sunak did? Nothing.
No.
Until the public started speaking, until the veterans, like the ones Henry Riley was in the back of that taxi with earlier today, started articulating their shock, actually. And they did it in such a dignified... We'll play that clip again, actually, after this break. Just the clip of Henry talking to the veterans. It was so dignified, so diplomatic, and so wrong that they should ever have been put in that position by their own Prime Minister.
James O'Brien on LBC.
17 minutes after 11, developing, of course, as our show goes on, this story, the Shadow Defence Secretary John Healey has now written to, and here's a phrase I still can't say with a straight face, the Secretary of State for Defence Grant Shapps, drawing attention to some of the claims that are being made in media, and also asking some questions about how on earth this happened. In fact, John Healey could have been coming up with the phone-in topics for this programme. Did the Prime Minister himself suggest that this was not the best use of his time? If not the Prime Minister, who did? Did he record the television interview with ITV while D-Day events were still going on in Normandy? He goes on, reports in the media attributed to the Conservative campaign headquarters on Wednesday morning claimed the Prime Minister was giving the next 2 days over to D-Day out of respect. Did they know this to be untrue at the time? If not, when was the decision made to cut short the Prime Minister's attendance at the D-Day ceremonies? And the French government is reported to have said that they were told a week ago that the Prime Minister would not attend the D-Day 80th commemoration. Is this true? Do you believe that the Prime Minister apologising in a social media post is sufficient? Will you encourage the Prime Minister to make a further, fuller statement of apology? And there's more, which I may share with you in the course of this hour. I can also tell you that having listed all the front pages upon which this story didn't appear today, although I suspect it will tomorrow, it's gone international. It's the front page story on the NBC News website in America. British PM Sunak apologises with a Z. Doesn't that drive you mad? I suppose Americans are allowed Americanisms, but oof. British PM Sunak apologises for leaving D-Day events early for election campaign. Already embattled and unpopular, Rishi Sunak cut short his time in Normandy to fly back to London for a TV interview. Sometimes that old Robbie Burns line really hits home, doesn't it? Would some power... I always get that bit wrong, don't I? Would some gift the power gears to see ourselves as other seers? That's how we look to the outside world now. An already embattled and unpopular Prime Minister cut short his time in Normandy to fly back to London for a TV interview. 2 questions this hour. What was the calculation then behind this decision? And has it actually nudged your needle in terms of voting intention? 0345 6060 First, though, a little reminder of that extraordinary moment when Henry Riley, in the back of a black cab, in the back of a London cab, because the cabbie community of London convene every year to take veterans to D-Day for the ceremonies and back. And Henry put it to a clutch of veterans with whom he has made friends this week, that the Prime Minister had come home from the D-Day, the international commemoration ceremony, attended by Emmanuel Macron, attended by the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, and attended by the US President Joe Biden. The UK Prime Minister had come home early.
I've lost all faith in him because they're all our fallen.
And you're getting upset about that?
Yeah.
And some of you were telling me earlier you're Conservatives normally, and does this upset you?
This debacle yesterday, that was outrageous.
Yeah.
But, what can you do? It is what it is.
And Tom, RAF veteran, what do you think?
Well, I think he should have stopped there and saw the shore out.
To leave a service early, I think, is very disrespectful, especially for our lost comrades, and the veterans who are at the service must feel a bit let down. I mean, it's just not on.
Yeah.
But I find that's quite a lot with many politicians because they haven't served in the armed forces, so they don't realise the consequences, loss that we feel.
Okay.
Therefore, I think what he did was very, very disrespectful.
Powerful stuff, as indeed have all of Henry's reports from Normandy been this week. I need to tell you that I nearly said on air that I wish I had now, because it's going to sound like I'm claiming a retrospective achievement, but I nearly said the worst thing the Tories could do now is ... I need to double check something that I've just been sent, but I think Johnny Mercer has just done it. I think the Veterans Minister has just done the thing were I advising the Conservatives on how to deal with this current debacle, I would have said the one thing you mustn't do is ... And Veterans Minister Johnny Mercer has just done it. But I need to double check that. If indeed it appears to be what it appears to be, if it is what it appears to be, I'll share it with you shortly. Back to the phone. Zoe's in Fife. Zoe, what was the calculation? What do you think happened here?
Well, I think... good morning, James.
Hello, Zoe.
Good morning.
Hello.
I think given how petty this crowd are, I think they thought they could steal a march on the opposition.
How?
Well, they're all busy.
Yeah, but
not with the time.
Yeah, but the interview's pre-recorded.
Yeah, I know, but there's a lot to do. And while they were all busy...
Yeah?
I mean, I think he's at a kind of natural disadvantage here, to be fair, in a way. He probably doesn't have the sort of family cultural background that somebody or an immigrant family that had been here longer might have, where we grew up.
He was born
in
here.
Amongst all of that. He was born here, absolutely, but his parents weren't, I mean...
He went to Westminster. His dad was a doctor.
Yeah, absolutely.
Ran a chemist shop in Southampton.
No, we've heard all about the running.
Well, he's as British as I am, Zoe. I'm not quite sure what point you think you're making.
No. I'm just saying that you're sort of surrounded by it, by family going back generations of probably Nigel Farage's family. I'm just saying that
quite a lot of Indians fought in the Second World War.
Oh, they certainly did. They certainly did.
For the same side as the D-Day veterans.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, my grandfather volunteered and was Irish Catholic and volunteered from Dublin. He was from Dublin.
But even if there were some sort of familial gap in the grasp of the significance of this moment, which for the record I completely reject, then the responsibility of his team to steer him would become even more acute. Arrogance. So I wonder if we should have a way. Can we get some software so we can see what words appear most on mornings like this, because there's no way I can keep track of my inbox. But arrogance is coming in a lot. And for once, it's not about me. It's all about Rishi Sunak. And that idea that there's a sort of, well, why would I? I mean, I'll do whatever I would. So you saw that with Johnson. Johnson wouldn't have messed this up in the way that Rishi Sunak has. Johnson's offences were in many ways worse, but better, if you see what I mean. They were not... It's very easy for Boris Johnson to understand why he can't come home early from D-Day. Something in Rishi Sunak's team failed to grasp that very simple point. And the arrogance that involves is probably pertinent, isn't it? Just that sense of, yes, well, who cares? You know, we don't need to worry about that sort of thing. But I even then, I can't quite get my head around how thick the walls of your echo chamber would have to be in order to pull that off. 25 after 11. Keir Starmer, as you would expect, has commented on the subject. Rishi Sunak, of course, still hasn't. So there'll be journalists literally, well, not literally, but there'll be journalists dogging him, following him everywhere. For the entire campaign anyway, but today they will only want to ask him one question. And we should probably catch up. Is Natasha on the trail with him today? We should probably catch up with whoever is, because I presume that the media management operation now kicking in for the Tories is of a scale rarely seen. But at some point he will have to speak into a microphone, which Sir Keir Starmer has already done.
Well, look, politics is about the choices you make. And this election is about character, who you have in your mind's eye when you make decisions. And for me, there was only one place I was going to be, which is there to pay my respects to the veterans and to say thank you to them on behalf of all of us, including my young children who, as I said to many of the veterans, were pretty carefree yesterday going to school, but that was down to their sacrifice, and the sacrifice particularly of those colleagues of theirs who didn't make it back. I was struck by the effort that those veterans made to be there, because they're in their late 90s, they're in wheelchairs, and for them to have got to Normandy was an incredible effort, for some of them emotionally difficult as well, and they will still be making their way back, I suspect. So there was only one choice I was going to make. Prime Minister made a different choice, and he'll have to answer for that.
When will he answer for it, of course, is the question. Presumably while I'm on air. I can't quite see him getting all the way to lunchtime without somebody getting a microphone under his nose, but you never know. Stranger things have happened. 27 minutes after 11 is the time. Kobe is in Thirsk, a lovely part of the world. Kobe, what do you think's happened here?
Hi, James. I honestly don't think there is any calculation at play right now. I think this is just a testament to his upper class incomprehension and just blatant ignorancy. I just don't know what he's playing.
I can't let you get away with the word ignorancy while you're attacking somebody else for not being on the ball. I think you just invented that word, Kobe.
Yeah.
But that's all right. We like inventing words, but it's blatant ignorancy. But there's still a calculation, even if his sort of patrician entitlement or his financial insulation is the reason, is part of the reason behind it. There's still a calculation. The decision to go home early was calculated.
Yeah, I mean, I just can't really think of one.
No, nor can I.
It's a sort of an ineffable thing to do, especially with a voter base like Rishi Sunak,
yes,
who are mostly older people who are very who view D-Day as a very important day. They're very enthusiastic about it.
Yes, but they're going to be more aware of it than younger generations. There's no debate about whether or not it was important, but there is obviously generational difference on how well appreciated that importance is. But I think I see what you mean when you say there's no calculation, is that they never really gamed it. They never thrashed it out. They just, that was the schedule. No one challenged it. We're coming home because we always do whatever we want.
Well, yeah, it just really shows how out of touch he is with not only his own voter base, but just the general public as a whole.
I wonder whether your outrage is faux, Kobe. Because that's what happens next. Is the next thing to happen is the accusation that everybody's just pretending to be cross or pretending to be upset about this because defending Rishi Sunak is so impossible. And that is the advice I would have given Tories had they deigned to call me earlier this morning, I would have said the worst thing you can do now is try and push it back onto the people who are disgusted by what your fella has done. And I think, and now with a little bit more confidence than I had a moment ago, I think that is what the actual Veterans Minister has tried to do this morning. We'll double check after the very latest headlines with Thomas Watts.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 11:33. What's the worst thing you can do when you're in a hole? Keep digging. Up pops Veterans Minister Johnny Mercer to accuse the people who are disgusted by the Prime Minister's conduct yesterday of being the problem.
Prime Minister, on these visits, you receive a lot of advice as to what you should and shouldn't be doing. I've spoken to the Prime Minister this morning, and obviously it's disappointing. But I do find, the kind of faux outrage from people who've done nothing but make my life difficult trying to improve veterans affairs over the years pretty nauseating, to be frank.
Yeah, let's all spare a thought for Johnny Mercer.
I've lost all faith in him because they're all our fallen.
And you're getting upset about that?
Yeah.
And some of you were telling me earlier you're Conservatives normally, and does this upset you?
This debacle yesterday, that was outrageous.
Yeah.
But, what can you do? It is what it is.
And Tom, RAF veteran, what do you think?
Well, I think he should have stopped there and saw the shore out.
To leave a service early, I think, is very disrespectful, especially for our lost comrades, and the veterans who are at the service must feel a bit let down. I mean, it's just not on.
Yeah.
But I find that's quite a lot with many politicians because they haven't served in the armed forces, so they don't realise the loss that we feel.
Okay.
Therefore, I think what he did was very, very disrespectful.
Johnny Mercer, the Veterans Minister, of course, did serve in the armed forces, which perhaps makes it all the more regrettable that he should accuse people articulating their upset and outrage at what Rishi Sunak did yesterday as indulging in what he described as faux outrage. But I suppose desperate times call for desperate measures. And as he also said, you get a lot of advice from your Prime Minister, which is kind of where we are. What possible advice could he have received? Now, I think it's probably pertinent that the bloke who is currently masterminding his campaign or working with Sunak on strategy in this general election is a chap called Isaac Levido, who's from New South Wales in Australia. He was behind what is described on his Wikipedia page as the successful campaign in the 2019 UK general election. Now, of course, it was successful technically. That's not an opinion, that's counting. Boris Johnson secured an 80-seat majority. But you need to ask yourself how. And the answer to that would be partly by being up against somebody who hemorrhaged support, traditional support for his own party, and partly by lying repeatedly about Brexit. So if you're confused perhaps by why Rishi Sunak is doubling down on his lies about Labour's taxation plans, that £2,000 figure, by the way, while bogus, is also over a 4-year period, not a 1-year period, as Sunak sought to convey during the leaders' debate. So if the bloke masterminding your election is the same bloke who, quotes, masterminded, end quotes, Boris Johnson's victory, which was built largely on lies and circumstance, then perhaps the mystery of why Sunak is doubling down on the lie is easily solved. If we extrapolate from that, or if we move from that to the question of what's the calculation here, then perhaps we're beginning to see the rabbit. Perhaps Isaac Levido, his Australian elections guru, perhaps Isaac Levido did calculate that getting back to London to record a video with ITV in which we could tell that lie again and again and again and again was actually really important. We got it because this is what he does. He is the quotes genius, end quotes, who sells the big lie, whether it's on the side of a bus or whether it's a promise to get Brexit done. You get the lie out there. You treat the public with complete contempt. And you get back to London as quick as you possibly can in order to get the lie on more tape, on ITV tape. Get this lie. And if your commitment to the lie, if your love of the lie is so complete, so all-conquering, then perhaps it would cloud out the importance of a D-Day commemoration. I don't care about anything else. Getting back to London to tell that lie again. That's our only chance, that lie. The lie about Labour's tax plans is the Obi-Wan Kenobi of the Conservative election campaign. It's their only hope. And that's why, perhaps, you can just begin to imagine the circumstances in which they would somehow manage to forget the significance, overlook the importance, ignore the profundity of the D-Day celebrations, and get back to London to tell that lie again. Maybe. I don't know. But then you have Rishi Sunak and David Cameron in the room where it happens. And that involves both of them saying, yep, great idea. Stuff D-Day. Let's get back to London to lie. Davey, you can stand in for me. No problem at all, Rishi. That's the bit where I can't quite believe it happened. Unless they're now so desperate electorally, unless the polling is so poor, that they're kind of doing everything this Australian fella says. This Isaac Levido character about whom little is known. Maybe they just go, look, I don't know, nothing we've tried's worked. National service. Maybe that was one of his ideas. But if he, do you see what I mean? The circumstances in which, I don't know if this has ever happened to you. I don't know if it's ever happened to me, except in anxiety dreams. But when you can just surrender responsibility for your own decisions, and you can just, all right, I'll just go with the flow. That can be quite liberating when you're in trauma. Having an absolutely terrible time, and someone says, right, don't worry, I'm in charge. Yeah, it's a bit like if you can't decide what to have for dinner, and someone says, right, you're having the beans. You go, oh, that's a relief. Someone's chosen for me. Because this menu's too big, I'm too scared. I'm scared of the choices in front of me. I'm too scared, there's too many choices. And then this chap pops up and says, right, we're going home early to tell more lies. And you just go, okay, great. I don't know. But this is what happens when there's a vacuum. Anything could move into it. I would quite like to find, I should probably have a conversation with the producer during the next break, but I would quite like to find out exactly what Sunak is up to and how likely or when we can expect somebody to get a microphone under his nose. 11:39 is the time. But the question remains, the calculation, what the hell was it? And apart from Geraldine, so far, no, I mean, to be fair, as quite a few of you are pointing out on text, it's very, very hard to get through to the studio at the moment. But that said, nonetheless, if it is a vote changer for you, I don't know, would I be? No, I wouldn't be surprised, actually. I mean, the only problem I've got here is that I look at the polling and can't believe the Tories are still hitting 20. I find myself thinking, kindly, I hope, what the hell, what more do you want? You know, if they're not racist enough for you, then there's an obvious place for you to go. So who the hell is left? Who is that 20? But it exists. And the question then is directed at that cohort of voters. Is this actually going to nudge your needle? Because I'd have thought if you were staying loyal up until yesterday, you're probably superglued to the Conservative Party, aren't you? Or could this possibly be the solvent to set you free? I don't know. Amin is in Peterborough. Amin, what would you like to say?
How you doing, James? Hope you're well.
I'm very well. Thank you.
I'm baffled and slightly amazed by the audacity of the Conservative government at the moment. I think it's a combination, and I'm probably going to state the obvious, but they've prioritised this TV interview, maybe thinking that they can cover both bases. There'll be photos of him there, people will see that, they'll think he attended. There's been a lot of reports recently on the radio and on LBC as well, saying that younger generations of British public aren't even aware of what D-Day is. And I think maybe in their calculations, they've added up, okay, that demographic maybe won't be that bothered about you not staying there all day. Yeah. And also...
he's done it. He's been there. He's done the ceremony. We had a British ceremony. The King's there. Prince William's there. He's been photographed with all of these people. He's done the rounds. He's met the veterans. He took his wife. They've been photographed looking at an aeroplane.
That's it. So people will see that. Also, Keir Starmer will be there all day. Another of your caller mentioned we can get this interview out of the way. We'll be one step ahead, one interview ahead, for example, trying to play catch up. Yeah. And I think it just literally demonstrates how detached from reality this government is. When I watch, my personal opinion, when I watch Rishi Sunak in the public sphere, he cannot read a room. I really, he might be book smart, but I don't think he's got the street smarts, if you know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I like that distinction.
I'm a 30-year-old British Muslim. I know that if these people, these heroes, during the World Wars, D-Day, if they had not sacrificed what they did, we all may have not had the lives that we're having right now, right?
Absolutely.
And although I can't take a full day off work because, my mortgage has gone up and X, Y, and Z thanks to a certain government,
yes.
I expect the Prime Minister to have that awareness and that respect that, you know what, I need to at least be here for the duration of the day, even if it's because Keir Starmer's there all day, at least match him. Do you know what I mean, right? And the audacity to think that, and I'll be honest with you, I'm going to blame myself a little bit as a member of the British public and a voter. Because by hook or by crook, no matter how many scandals there have been, no matter how many lies that have been found to be the case, we've kept them in power. They've stayed in power. And their recipe, I think they think it works. This country's gone backwards, in my opinion, in the last 14 years from where it was prior to the Conservatives coming in. And they stay in power. And I think they think this recipe works. Lies, a bit of deceit, a bit of trickery.
Well, it does. Well, yeah, you're right. I mean, sometimes you need someone to point out what's staring you right in the face. This is the point I was making about Isaac Levido. It does work. So at some point, you failed to notice. Earlier caller talking about, I think it was Russ in Bangor, talking about normalisation. At some point, you failed to notice that the
obvious staring.
The ship has sailed. I mean, this is what they do. They lie and they dissemble and they prioritise their own personal gratification over absolutely everything else, and they think it's all one bloody great game.
But I think this is one step too far. I think if somebody like me, as a British Muslim person who didn't have any family in the, serving in the military or anything like that, I don't go to D-Day events or anything like that. Sure. However, if I'm absolutely flabbergasted by the fact that he prioritised, I'm just going to say how it is, they prioritised that interview over staying there the whole day. Otherwise, they wouldn't have done it. It's obvious.
They must, I mean, there's some. I mean, that's Occam's razor, isn't it? There's some stuff is just it will be the simplest possible analysis. They looked at their choices and decided this was more important, and more importantly, where the hubris or the arrogance or the entitlement kicks in. Oh, we'll either no one will notice, or even if they do, we'll get away with it.
Yeah, the blowback will be minimal. We'll be able to cover it with a few interviews. We'll be low with the media for the next few days.
Yeah.
And you know what? The British public, the younger generation aren't too bothered about it, but I think I still just about fit into that category, and I am.
Yeah, right. Well, I don't, so you can have that one.
No, I appreciate it. And, so I think that's about it. And can I just say one thing to the previous caller?
Yeah, of course.
During April 2021, my father went into hospital during COVID. He was in a coma for a month, and we weren't allowed to see him due to the COVID lockdown rules.
Of course.
They called us in on the day when they were going to turn the machines off, and they had paralysed him, so we couldn't even say goodbye properly. And all I wanted to say is, obviously, that caller that's called in before, you're not on your own, mate. Make your family proud, make your dad proud, and, I don't want people to think they're on their own, because, we've got to a point in this society where I think everybody's just worried about their own back, and there are still people out there that can relate and do care.
Beautifully put. Thank you, Amin. And the caller you refer to as Russ in Bangor, who I'm sure if he's still listening will really appreciate your words. I know I do. 11:46 is the time.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It's 11:49. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I'm told that a pool clip has been recorded and will be made available imminently. I don't currently know whether whether it's just a kind of recording with no toing and froing, with no pushback. I suspect it probably is, and I think that's another mistake. I think that Rishi Sunak, I mean, I would go so far as to say now that if anybody was actually willing to take over, then his position would be in jeopardy. I think that I genuinely think that. I could be wrong. I might change my mind by the time Sheila gets here. Might change my mind before that. But I mean, how do you explain to somebody who doesn't grasp it how important yesterday was? Whether you think it should be or not, the tides of media and politics are rarely stronger than when discussing the Second World War in general, and the notions of patriotism and gratitude in particular, and never more so than on the anniversary of D-Day. And that, I think I do think the more we've talked about it this morning, and I'm never 100% confident at signing up to any conclusions based exclusively on what we've done together, because it's a small corner, isn't it? It can sometimes be a bit of an echo chamber. But it just feels bigger now than it did at 10 o'clock. And that is coming from a place that already thought it was an outrageous error, an egregious misstep. While most of the right-wing media, most of the newspapers were hoping that no one else would notice and it would somehow be ignored and go away. It was the photograph, wasn't it? It was the photograph. The idea that Joe Biden, Olaf Scholz and Emmanuel Macron would be there and Rishi Sunak would not. I think that is a picture that speaks 1,000 words. I really do. But I mean, whether or not I'm getting a bit ahead of myself when I say if anybody fancied this job, his position would possibly be in jeopardy. He'd be facing some pressure to resign. But who the hell would want to take over now? 11:51 is the time. Alex is in. I'll play you that pull clip as soon as it arrives. Alex is in Carmarthen. Alex, what would you like to say?
Morning, James. How you doing?
Very well, mate. What's on your mind?
Yeah, so tiny bit of context before I get into where I think this calculation was. I remember listening to your show the day after the election in 2019, and you just asked one question.
Did I?
People who voted Labour, people who'd always voted Labour, who switched to Conservatives, why did you do it?
Yes.
What made you do it? Now, I think the calculation was, if we're going to have any chance in the now blue/red wall, those are the voters that we need to cling on to. And in these early campaign stages, where we have something of a real policy vacuum, I'm not counting the National Service as a real policy, that was thrown out there, I suspect, but we haven't had solid manifesto yet. In this vacuum, were they thinking, let's just fill the void with the lie, because we know it's a lie.
Yeah.
Can we just get our name out there more and more and more? And there's two reasons why I think this is there's many reasons why I think this is a massive misstep, but leaving aside the obvious one of the disrespect. Firstly, last night I had the very real honour of being able to play a last post for the D-Day commemorative concert. There were people there from young children right up to veterans, many social backgrounds, many ethnicities.
Of course, yes.
If the idea is in the Tory machine that the younger generation don't understand or don't care, they've made a major miscalculation in my judgment. And secondly, this is a man who in a few weeks' time is going to ask us to hand him the control of our nuclear arsenal, to all of our armed forces. Where's the common sense? Where is the common sense?
Well, he's also tried to turn national security into an election issue, hasn't he?
He has, yes. Despite the fact that Labour have categorically backed Trident, they've backed the nuclear deterrent, they've backed our armed forces. But it seems to me with this iteration, as you put it, of the Conservatives, because previously I thought there was hope, but with this iteration, it's let's just shout as loud as we can. Doesn't matter if it's true, because some people are going to believe us.
And that could actually be a tactic, couldn't it? We've got probably a flaw sometimes in our thinking that these characters, these gurus that pull strings of politicians or conduct elections must be geniuses. But it could just be a lie is halfway around the world before the truth has got its trousers on. And here's a wonderful opportunity for us to get back, inflate the latest lie while Keir Starmer's too busy talking to Volodymyr Zelensky about the war that's currently unfolding on European soil.
And we've seen very recently with the disastrous mini budget, people must have given advice to Truss and Kwarteng saying, you cannot do this. Now we're going to do it anyway. Maybe that's happened here. Maybe his advisors are as bewildered as we are this morning, saying, we told you this was going to happen, Mr. Sunak. We warned you.
Well, that's the bit we'll probably never know. That if anybody in the room where it happened said at any point, this is really bad, this is a really silly thing to do. What on earth are we talking? How can we be even considering coming back early, going home early? That's the bit, even after 2 hours of conversation, that's the bit that I still can't quite. I mean, maybe that is the conclusion that we're all edging towards, is that literally nobody questioned it, which is why I find myself wondering what the hell David Cameron was playing at. Literally nobody questioned it, nobody criticised it, up to and including the former Prime Minister and Foreign Secretary David Cameron, who, for his myriad faults, would surely understand the significance of being photographed alongside three other world leaders inextricably linked to the Second World War in general and D-Day in particular. Extraordinary. Anyway, I said I'd use that word a lot today. I probably haven't used it quite as much as I thought I would, but we've still got an hour to go. Mark's in Exeter. Mac, I beg your pardon. Mac's in Exeter. Mac, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. First-time caller.
Welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Ex-military, served in 3 years of conflict.
Well, thank you.
That's okay. Both grandfathers were actually involved in action on D-Day. One grandfather, my dad's dad, via the beaches, and my mother's father was a paratrooper who actually got shot in the neck when he came down on D-Day. I can tell you my outrage is not faux.
No. No, that's a huge misstep by Johnny Mercer, isn't it? Because even if some people are going to slightly ramp up their unhappiness in order to score points against their political opponents, that everybody with a history of service or a family history of service is going to feel insulted by this, I think.
Totally. He's an MP down the road. We haven't got much respect for Mr. Mercer, the veterans that I know. He's done very little for us in relation to the Gulf War and Gulf War syndrome, etc. However, I know this is not your question and answer show, but I've got a question for you.
Uh-oh.
Is this the biggest gaffe by a serving Prime Minister in pre-election history?
I think that's our 12 o'clock topic, Mac. Whether or not I answer it, only time will tell, but I can promise you I may not introduce the round of applause and the Ray Liotta into proceedings today because it wouldn't be appropriate. Well, the obvious comparison would be the bigoted woman comments, wouldn't it, that Gordon Brown made in 2010 when he didn't know he was being recorded. But and when there was an awful lot of faux outrage, oddly, plenty of people just saw that as a wonderful opportunity to undermine Gordon Brown. And I'd compound that with the fact that he didn't realise there were cameras when he apologised. I think it was on a BBC radio station, and this was in the days, believe it or not, before there were cameras everywhere. And the man looked broken. The man which made it a different order of gaffe. But in terms of objectively measuring offence, stroke, anger, this has got to be worse than that, hasn't it? Don't you think? What do you think?
I think a lot of people that were going to vote Tory have now had their minds made up.
Well, I've only spoken to one so far. It'd be interesting to see if there's any more. Were you wobbling?
I've always been a Tory voter, but I was thinking of not this time. However, 100% not now.
Yeah. You can't. I mean, I don't see how you could, frankly, and I don't know is there any explanation at all he could offer? I think I've got the clip now is coming through. Is there anything he could say that might alleviate the situation?
I don't think so. I think, your previous caller hit it on the head. I think we'll get away with it. He had his photos taken. He was seen to be there and then slid away. But as my dear old dad used to say, if you want to know what state a country's in, look at the state of its roads, and I'll leave it at that because we all know what that's like.
Yeah, I don't know if that holds true forever, but I was thinking today because there are bits of road that are in really good nick, and they always tend to be around sort of Westminster and Kensington and Chelsea when I'm coming in on my bike. So we'll play the statement from Rishi Sunak in full after the very latest news headlines, because he started speaking while I was talking to Mac, and I want you to hear it from beginning to end. Thomas may have elements of it in his news bulletin, he may not. The clock may have been against us, but I'll play you this in full, and depending on what he says, and he is answering questions, he is pushing back, and he is being robustly interrogated on this. Depending on that, we may ask Mac's question about whether or not in the annals of pre-election stumbles, this is the biggest ever.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 3 minutes after 12, and the hot water in which the Prime Minister finds himself after ducking out of D-Day commemorations early is so hot that we haven't even mentioned Taylor Swift yet today. And we're not going to now, because he has now conducted what is called a pool clip, which means that in order to sort of satisfy the appetites of the entire media. One member of it gets to interview the politician in question, and then every outlet is offered equal access to that clip. It's 5 minutes and 50 seconds long, and I'm going to play it to you in its entirety. I haven't heard it before, so what we do after listening to this is currently somewhat up in the air.
Over the past 2 days, I've participated in a number of events in Portsmouth and France to honour those who risked their lives to defend our freedom and our values 80 years ago. The itinerary for these events was set weeks ago, before the start of the general election campaign, and having participated in all the British events with British veterans, I returned home before the International Leaders event later in the day. On reflection, that was a mistake, and I apologise. I think it's important, though, given the enormity of the sacrifice made, that we don't politicise this. The focus should rightly be on the veterans who gave so much. I had the honour and privilege of speaking to many of them and their families, hearing their stories, expressing my gratitude personally to them. But I'm someone who will always admit when I've made a mistake. That's what you'll always get from me.
I have to say, Prime Minister, you sound more exasperated than apologetic. These men made the ultimate sacrifice, and you couldn't even sacrifice a whole afternoon. Ken Hay, a 98-year-old D-Day veteran, told us that you let the country down. Is he right?
I participated in events both in Portsmouth and in France over 2 days because this is an incredibly important moment for our country to commemorate the sacrifice of all of those and their service. And it was a real honour and a privilege to meet many veterans and speak to them and their families, hear their stories, express my gratitude to them, and build on our record of making sure that this is the best country in the world for veterans.
Honestly, you didn't care, did you?
No, I cared deeply.
Then why didn't you stay?
As I said, the itinerary for these events was set weeks ago, before the general election campaign. I participated in events both in Portsmouth and in France, and having fully participated in all the British events with British veterans, I returned home before the International Leaders event. That was a mistake, and I apologise for that. But I will always be proud of our record in supporting veterans here in the UK. We have a dedicated Office for Veterans Affairs, the first Veterans Minister sitting in Cabinet, and a range of programmes to support them with health, housing, employment needs. That's something that I've worked very personally on because it's personally important to me. And as I said yesterday and the day before, I had the privilege of speaking with many veterans and their families to express my personal gratitude to them for their service to our country and to honour what they and their colleagues have done for us.
I'm told your team considered cancelling your attendance at the entire event yesterday. Your team denies this. I'm told by sources that denial is a flat lie. So can you clarify for viewers, did you or anyone around you ever consider skipping the Normandy celebration?
That's simply not right. The itinerary for these events was set weeks ago before the general election campaign. Of course I was always scheduled to participate both in Portsmouth and in France. I was proud and privileged to do so, to have the honour of meeting with many veterans and their families, to express my personal gratitude for everything that they've done for our country, to honour their service, their sacrifice, and ensure that our young generation learns from their example, hears the stories to understand what has happened before so that we might live today in freedom. It was a great and humbling privilege for me to spend time with all the families. As I said, after all the British events and all the British veterans that I spoke to, those events had finished, I returned home to the UK before the International Leaders event later in the day. On reflection, that was a mistake, and I apologise for that, but I'm very happy to admit when I've made a mistake. That's what you always get from me.
One of the Conservative candidates standing in this election for the party that you lead has just told me your actions show a disdain for the armed forces and disdain for them and their colleagues. They say you don't understand patriotism. I'm told some are in tears at the way you're running this campaign. What do you say to them?
Well, I think people can judge me by my actions when it comes to supporting the armed forces. In this campaign, it's the Conservative Party led by me, which is increasing the amount of investment that we're putting into our armed forces to 2.5% of GDP. That's not something that's been matched by the Labour Party, so there is a clear choice about backing our armed forces. And it's also me as Prime Minister that's made sure we have the first ever dedicated Veterans Minister in Cabinet with a dedicated Office for Veterans Affairs, which we have fully funded to support veterans, whether it's with their mental or physical health, with housing, with employment opportunities, and that's something that I'm personally committed to, and my track record demonstrates that.
We're in an election campaign. Keir Starmer managed to stay for the whole event. You didn't. What does that say about your judgment, your priorities, and your character?
As I said, the itinerary for this set of events was set weeks ago, before the election campaign even began. So I don't think it's right to politicise these things. I stuck to the itinerary that had been set for me as Prime Minister weeks ago, before the election, fully participated, expressed my gratitude to the veterans.
No shame at all.
As I said, on reflection, it was a mistake not to stay longer, and I've apologised for that. But I also don't think it's right to be political in the midst of D-Day commemorations. The focus should rightly be on the veterans and their service and sacrifice for our country.
It's the veterans who are saying that you're letting the country down. Are they politicising this?
No, I've apologised for not staying longer. On reflection, that was a mistake. I did have the privilege and the pleasure of meeting many, many veterans and their families over the course of the past 2 days, and expressing to them my personal gratitude for everything that they have done, hearing from their stories, and making sure that right now we are getting veterans across the country all the support they need, whether it's with housing, health, employment opportunities. That's something I think is very important, something I've championed from the first moment I became Prime Minister, and our track record on that is clear for everyone to see.
It's 10 minutes past 12. Did he just make it worse? When do you think the itinerary might have been set? I think it was weeks ago, possibly. But was it set in stone or something? Was it set in sort of biblical tablets, so that nobody could say in the course of yesterday, oh, well, I know we're scheduled to go home, but it's only for I keep feeling sorry for Paul Brand today. It sounds like everyone's saying, why would anyone come back from D-Day to spend time with Paul Brand? Paul's a lovely bloke, brilliant journalist. It's just a coincidence that he was in the chair for this one. It's absolutely not personal. I'm sure Paul would agree that it's quite strange for a Prime Minister to decide to come back early from D-Day commemorations to sit down with him for an hour, or anybody. I've cleared the board. I apologise to everybody who was waiting to answer the questions that I've been answering since 10 o'clock. There's nothing to exclude you from ringing in again. Indication. So what would we normally get? About 100 messages a minute, give or take? Say we normally get 100 messages a minute. Busiest by far of any radio programme in this country. Just got 1,200 in 2 minutes of you responding to what you were hearing. Just at the end, the last 2 minutes of that apology, we got 1,200 messages. I'm yet to see a positive one, but they are spooling past me so quickly, I'm struggling to see any of them, to be honest with you. But that word arrogant keeps popping up. The word robot keeps popping up a lot. And an awful lot of you making the same joke as me about when precisely that itinerary might have been set, because you seem to repeat that about 30 times. I can't believe that. I've never seen any. Have you seen anything like this before, Keith? I mean, that, again, you are responding live to something that was as near as, damn it, to unfolding live in front of you. But and I am struggling, so I'll try and just click on a couple. Absolutely outrageous. He's made it worse and he simply doesn't care, says Adrian in Poole. Nigel says, no. Pete says, oh my God, it was like a tape on loop. Nigel says he's just said the itinerary was done weeks ago, so he was always planning on leaving early. To do what? Have a nap? So he didn't leave to do the interview. This guy is just not a very good liar. The interview with ITV was at the last minute, adds someone else. You've got to stop sending me messages or I'm not going to be able to read any of them out. Pretty sure the 80th D-Day celebrations would have been in the diary for the last 80 years. I'm actually embarrassed, says David, to be considered a Tory supporter. There's some language I can't repeat on the radio. Rebecca goes for Wazzock, which I think probably is acceptable. Natalie writes, Rishi is a total disgrace to the fallen of D-Day. Penelope writes, that's the most disingenuous robotic patter. He's claiming, says Jez in Liverpool, that the itinerary for an interview was set before the election was announced. It's a very good point, actually. I don't think he was quite doing that, but the date, the time at which they left France would have been set in advance, I guess, is the claim. Hi, James. He's awful. This is Carl in Liverpool. His privilege is destroying his career and the Tory party. Angelo, keep digging, James. What a useless human being this Rishi guy is. Chris Wilson says he's not even going to make it to election day, is he? quite a lot of you picking up on this question about the itinerary being planned months ago. I'd just say again, it's possible that the decision to leave at the time that they left was planned months ago, even if they didn't know that they would be returning for an interview with ITV. For once, a politician has held up his hands and apologised. Thank you to Alan in Uxbridge for giving us a vaguely positive contribution. I respect him for that. You are currently in a minority of one. Sam writes, I'm totally and utterly embarrassed by Rishi Sunak. He should be ashamed of himself. The Tories are disgraceful. Perhaps if he did a year's national service, suggests Johnny, he might be a little bit more respectful. He's a tetchy little so-and-so, isn't he? Says Andy, although he didn't deploy the words so-and-so. And Bernard also picking up on the apparent admission that he always intended to leave the international event early, even when he didn't have the excuse stroke explanation of political campaigning and or an interview with Paul Brand at ITV. And Roddy perhaps speaks for many people when he writes simply, put the spade down, Prime Minister. Your reactions to that apology after this.
James O'Brien on LBC.
Quick word on Sam Coates, the Sky News correspondent there who conducted that pooled interview with Rishi Sunak. That was absolutely brilliant, I felt. I don't know about you. I'm never shy of putting in a criticism or even putting the boot in when I feel that journalists with access to senior politicians, something that some of us haven't enjoyed for some time, when they fail to do their public duty and hold politicians properly to account, sometimes I fear either through a shared political outlook or through a keenness to retain access. You know, if you upset them too much in the modern world, it didn't used to be like this, then they may not come on your programmes anymore. But Sam Coates there, I think in close to unprecedented circumstances, and he hasn't been in broadcast for that long, Sam, although he did. I was told he used to work here. Did you know that? He used to answer the phones on Clive Bull's show, someone told me. I may have been having a fever dream when that came to my attention. But that almost unprecedented circumstances, I don't know how much notice he got. Bang in the moment, smack in the moment. Prime Minister, which puts a slightly different timbre on proceedings. He got the questions absolutely bang on. Got the tone absolutely perfect. And the pivots. He managed to be respectful and yet incredibly robust. I thought that was arguable. I know there's a bit of a danger of hyperbole on a day like today. We're already looking at what is probably the greatest pre-election gaffe in the history of British politics. But I think we may also there have heard one of the absolute masterclasses of on the hoof political interviewing. He got absolutely everything he could have hoped for from that interview, and we should all, not just colleagues and members of the same profession, but everybody with a vote should be grateful to him, to Sam Coates for the job that he did there. 18 minutes after 12 is the time. So that was weird, right? So words that if we had a word cloud of the nearly 2,000 messages that have come pouring into this, like a ticker tape. In my inbox, normally I can press a button, pause it, read a couple out. Now I can't at the moment. It's like a ticker tape buzzing past me furiously. If we had a word cloud, you'd have petulant. Petulant would be in the word cloud. Arrogant would be in the word cloud. Schedule, itinerary would be in the word cloud. Because how can it be an excuse that the itinerary was made weeks ago before the election happened? That makes it in some ways worse. We were never going to go to the foreign commemoration. It's all a bit Brexity, isn't it? Which takes us back to Alex in Tooting's analysis at the top of this show, or much, much earlier in this show. I'm not going to the... not going to go... Why would I want to pay tribute to the American veterans? Geesh, no chance. Or the French resistance. We did the British one and then we came home. Thank you very much. Becky says, can you play it again, please, James? I missed it. At this moment in proceedings, Becky, that's a soft no. I don't think I can be held responsible for the fact that you missed it, but I can, of course, direct you to the Global Player, where you can pause and rewind live radio shows. So if you did miss it, you just need to rewind back to about 12:03 and take it from there. So he's tried. He's given up his... Just tell me what you thought of it. There's no need for me giving you an highfalutin, characteristically verbose old analysis, is there? I wasn't hugely impressed. Were you? Bob's in Brighton. Bob, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. So Rishi Sunak asked to be judged on his track record, I think, in that little clip there.
He did, yeah.
So if we look at his voting record, he consistently votes for the use of military forces overseas, but he consistently votes against strengthening the military covenant which looks after veterans and their families.
I sense you weren't impressed by the apology.
I thought his tone was wrong. I thought that his pleading request to not politicise
that was pathetic.
Low.
Low is a good word. You're a bit milder than me. It was low because, I may play those clips that Henry talked to the veterans about. Of course, some people will be making political capital out of this. It's inevitable because Rishi Sunak is a politician and he's just kneecapped himself. But to try and turn it back against criticism or critics is just pathetic.
It is, and his record, like I said, supports military action deploying troops overseas, doesn't support improving care for the veterans and their families. That's a common position of voting across Conservative MPs. The armed forces have had 14 years of cutbacks. Yeah?
Yes.
So let's judge them on their record. Let's take him at his word. I'm sorry, I'm quite angry.
I can tell you what, this is a particular area of interest for you, is it, Bob, or just a...
No, I'm not a I've never served.
Okay.
My grandfather was a D-Day veteran, landed as a commando on Sword Beach.
Wow.
I think that this is... It's not just... I mean, that's his voting record. He abandoned an event early. He's come out and given a tetchy response. I mean, his lack of respect is written through him like a stick of rock.
I don't know if this sounds naive to you, mate. I don't understand how someone can get into their 40s in the United Kingdom without having an almost reverential respect, whether it's a good thing or not, whether we sometimes fetishise the military or in general or the Second World War in particular or not, isn't relevant. How do you get to be in your mid-40s in the United Kingdom without having an almost reverential respect for those men, actually, at D-Day? That's the bit I can't quite buy. Do you know what I mean?
I know. I'll go on further, James, if I can. We've had his talk about national service. I happen to know that Winchester College have sort of effectively it's an officer training corps, cadet force. Yeah, exactly. So he would have had the opportunity to take part in that. That's meant to be instilled at a young age at that school as part of the establishment.
Well, to be fair, my school had that as well, but it didn't exactly turn me into a proto-pilot, Bob. Far from it, in fact. No. But I take.
But you have respect.
You should do. Yeah, you absolutely should.
You learn respect, both. I can't get over.
You know what else he did? You know what else? Speaking to your point, Dorothy just WhatsApped me. She said, James, Sunak politicised it by leaving early to record a political interview.
Exactly.
Oh, that's a zinger.
Could have been recorded in France.
Yeah, of course, it could have been recorded on. It could have been recorded tomorrow. Well, there is that. Thank you, Dorothy. I can't believe I gave you the credit for that, even though you sent it in. I will be pretending it was entirely my own work for the rest of the programme. Bob, thank you. It's a great point. Judge me on my record. The man's out to lunch, isn't he? Judge me on my record. Mark says, James, you've been asking for months, if not years, when they will reach the bottom of the barrel. I think we all have to pray that this is it. Rick's in Kiverton. Rick, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. Nice to speak to you again.
Likewise.
So I was saying to your producer on the phone, I laughed with embarrassment listening to that clip.
Yeah.
With him saying, let's not politicise it, like you just said. One of the listeners was messaging saying he politicised it by...
Well, he left early to do a political interview in which he told political lies about his political opponent. But
exactly.
People shouldn't politicise his decision to leave early. I mean, I wonder if he realises now what a big... We're back to the question of who's advising him. Mr. Blobby and Gerald Ratner.
Oh no, Mr. Blobby's too intellectual for that.
Gerald Ratner's learnt his lesson. I mean, crikey. I can think of one person who's had an even more chaotic attempt at launching an electoral campaign, but it would be disloyal of me to name him now.
Yeah, especially with Ofcom. Don't forget Ofcom will get you in trouble. One thing that I noticed as well, I said to you, it sounded like the old term, his needle was stuck in the groove.
Yes.
Like, this is the message.
The itinerary was set weeks ago. I attended in Portsmouth. I itinerary was set weeks ago. I spoke to the British veterans.
Were they the only ones there?
Nope. They weren't.
No, they weren't. There was loads of them there. There was loads of different countries that represented the Allied side on D-Day, and all their leaders were able to go there. Even ones who are currently at war are still there.
This is I've never done this in all the years that I've been saying this is worse than satire. I'm just checking my contacts to see if I've got Armando Iannucci's phone number, because if this was the thick of it, would it have got past the script editor? There's no way a Prime Minister would come back early from D-Day. Early to record an interview and then get into huge amounts of trouble and say, let's not politicise it.
But then he also went on to say, let's not politicise it. But I've done this. We've done this with the first.
Judge me on my record.
Yeah, judge me on my record. We're given this much money. I've installed a veterans minister who, quite frankly, has not brushed himself in the finest with what he said today, has he?
No, he's talking about faux outrage, of course. Rick, thank you, mate. On we go. 0345 606 0973. Not just the phone number, of course, but also the number to WhatsApp me. An unprecedented number of WhatsApps. So many messages and WhatsApps coming into the studio that I think Keith is probably going to do something that he does on a biannual basis, and that is take a picture of the graph showing just how bonkers things went. I've already got it. He's taken a picture of the graph showing just how bonkers things went during the course of that apology from Rishi Sunak. And good Lord, I'll tell you what, I'll post that on Twitter. Do you want to see the graph of what happened to my inbox while Rishi Sunak was issuing his apology? It is actually spectacular. I shall share it with you after I've checked in on Matthew in Nottingham. Matthew, what would you like to say?
I'd like to say, James, that I think the media, I don't want to get too personal because I don't want to direct it specifically towards you, but I think a lot of the media are being dishonourable themselves here. I think you're trying to use anything you can to get at Rishi Sunak, and I think it's dishonourable that you're trying to use the D-Day celebration to do it. I served myself. I did 2 tours of Afghanistan, so I think I have a voice here, and I think you're using it.
Well, I understand your point, but speaking of voices, I'm just going to let you hear what some veterans in Normandy at the moment had to say about it.
Of course.
Earlier this morning.
I've lost all faith in him because they're all our fallen.
And you're getting upset about that?
Yeah.
And some of you were telling me earlier you're Conservatives normally, and does this upset you?
This debacle yesterday, that was outrageous.
Yeah.
But, what can you do? It is what it is.
And Tom, RAF veteran, what do you think?
Well, I think he should have stopped there and saw the shore out.
To leave a service early, I think, is very disrespectful, especially for our lost comrades, and the veterans who are at the service must feel a bit let down. I mean, it's just not on.
Yeah.
But I find that's quite a lot with many politicians because they haven't served in the armed forces, so they don't realise the loss that we feel.
Okay.
Therefore, I think what he did was very, very disrespectful.
You put the other side of the argument, Matthew.
Yeah, so, I mean, I think, no disrespect, but a lot of the media that are jumping all over
I'm talking about them because what the media has done in this case is give them a voice.
Well, no, of course, everybody's entitled to a view, and my view is the alternate one.
Yes.
And in this case, I'm saying that I think you're using it to punch him in the face continuously.
But what about them? What are they doing? What are they doing?
Well, at the end of the day, that's their view. They're entitled to say that if they want to, but I disagree with them. I do profoundly disagree with what they're saying, and I respect their service.
Which bits do you disagree with? So, I mean, what words would you use to describe the decision to go home early?
I would say the decision was wrong.
So what do you disagree with?
He's apologised.
Well, you heard. We've just listened to his apology. We've just listened to his apology. He didn't say.
He's right.
He didn't.
Judge him on his record.
Okay.
Judge him on his record.
That's
my view.
What would we look at first?
I would say look at the fact that what he said about the Veterans Affairs and the minister in cabinet under him, that's a fantastic move to put somebody in that place, especially Johnny Mercer being involved in it. It's fantastic. He's really got involved.
But Johnny Mercer has said that it was a terrible mistake that Rishi Sunak...
Yeah, I've said it's a mistake, but he's apologised.
So what are you disagreeing? Oh, so you're saying we should just move on then because he's apologised?
I'm saying you shouldn't continually pound him in the face continuously for the next 3 days over it or the next 24 hours.
Why not?
He's apologised, it's a mistake.
Why not?
We move on. Because he's apologised.
No, but why not?
Because he's apologised. He said he made a mistake, and I think that's fair enough.
But why shouldn't the story continue to be reported for the next? What are you worried about?
I'm not worried about.
So why don't you want the story to be reported then continuously?
Because he's apologised, and he's
I know that he's apologised, and we also report the apology. So why not carry on reporting?
So now leave it alone.
No.
Well, that's your call.
Thanks. And that was yours. Here's Jenny Barsby with the headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
12:33 is the time. I'm just trying to caption the graph. Messages coming into the studio. Guess where Sunak started apologising. That'll do it, will it? This is multimedia. You can actually hear me tapping out my tweet live on the radio. ? Messages coming into the studio. Guess where Sunak started apologising? Post. And that, if you follow me on Twitter, that would have appeared about now. Wow, that's magic, that is. That's amazing. It's like I'm in your house, isn't it? 12:34 is the time. Did the apology make a difference to you? Did it improve things? Last caller felt that the apology is and has been sufficient enough to stop talking about the fact that the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom came home early from D-Day commemorations. It is a position which I find absolutely absurd. But it is a position to which, of course, you are perfectly entitled, which is why we wanted to get it on air. But apologies if it caused any offence. It is almost unthinkable, A, that this happened, and B, that the hole in the course of this morning's programme since 10 a.m. has got bigger and bigger and bigger. What did the apology do for you? Tim is in Tunbridge. Tim, what would you like to say?
Hi.
Hello.
I think the advisors dusted off the Boris book of blindsiding, look for the usual sort of staple of excuses and this, that and the other. But basically the guy just can't cut it. I've always had a thing which is, if you tell a lie, you live a lie. And I think this is where this guy is just now totally trapped in this hole that he's dug. But I've just got something else I must add, is you've spoken about your fellow sort of journalist with great respect at ITN. So he's come back yesterday and he's recorded an interview, so he can't pull back on that. So, but what did he actually say? What's he said in that interview, having just come straight from...
He's doubled down on the lie about the Labour's tax plans.
What else?
I don't know. I'm not psychic.
Not exactly, that's one. No. But what I'm saying to you is, as a journalist, you know how you would hold back. If you've got something that you know is going to be an absolute bombshell, you're not going to suddenly say, and then he came on by show, and this is what he said.
So I see. So you think that there's going to be a sort of zinger in the ITN sit down conversation that they felt it was worth. I mean, that's the bit about the apology that I find. The more time passes since it finished, the stranger it becomes that the defence is we were always going to come home early anyway, which opens you up to all manner of new criticisms. But obviously, you can't have scheduled an election interview before the election was called. So there's not necessarily a disconnect there, but there's certainly a discombobulation. And you're saying, so there must have been really, really juicy stuff that they wanted to get into that interview. Otherwise, they wouldn't have opened the door to all of the brouhaha that is engulfing them at the moment.
Possibly.
Yeah. No, well, we'll see. I don't know. I'll check with Paul. I'll drop him a text. I'll ask Paul how many smoking guns are there in this in this interview. Thank you, Tim. Stuart's in Falkirk. Stuart, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. First time caller, but an avid listener to your show every day. Thank you.
Top man, thank you. What do you make of the apology?
Well, I have a grandfather who was killed in action.
Oh, Lord, I'm sorry.
He's buried in Italy, James. So my mother was only 4 when he went to war, and she was 10 when the telegram arrived at the house. And she told me the story about the telegram arriving at the house and how she was there with her mother when she read the telegram. And for 70, my mother was 82 when she passed away. She was 10 when they got the telegram. For 72 years, my mother cried silently in her heart for a father that she never got to see, for the eight children that she had that he never got to know, got to spend time with. And the other grandchildren from my auntie as well. So that's a whole family that lost out on a grandfather, and a grandfather that lost out on a family. And for Rishi Sunak to do what he did, I think is despicable. And he's fast becoming the man of apologies, because it's just, he's done so many things. It's apology.
It's not, though.
His apologies are rehearsed.
It's not apology. He never normally apologises. He normally doubles down, like Johnson did before him. I can't remember him apologising for anything else on this one. You've put me in a position of defending Rishi Sunak from the accusation that he apologises a lot.
Don't defend him, but I think to get away from that, I just think that what he's done is showed a complete disrespect for all the families out there who've lost a loved one, because we've all got that story to tell of a family member that we never got to spend time with.
Okay, if I were he, I would point out that I did properly commemorate the anniversary of your grandfather's sacrifice, because I went to the British ceremony and that I didn't miss that or come home early from that. So I think I could cobble together a defence of my conduct if I was Rishi Sunak in the context of your family history, couldn't I?
Well, I don't know, mate. I think if you're going to attend these ceremonies, you should be there to the last minute. And if other world leaders can do it, then the Prime Minister of the UK should do it to honour the people that's gave the ultimate sacrifice. So that he can live the life he's got today.
You heard the caller in Nottingham, Matt, I think, saying he's apologised now, so we should all move on. Your response to that?
Well, that's what I'm saying, though. There's no compassion in his apology. There's no sincerity in his apology. It's like, let's get this next interview at the road and move on. He just seems to brush everything aside, like people don't matter, people's lives don't matter, history doesn't matter. I think it's quite despicable. I really do.
Well, I don't think you're in a minority, Stuart. I really don't.
No, definitely not. Definitely not.
You take care, mate. 12:40 is the time. When the caller said we should stop punching Rishi Sunak in the face, remember it was him that punched the veterans, both living and dead, in the stomach first, says Danny in Liverpool. I kind of wonder what happens next. I do think that in relatively normal circumstances, if you had half a dozen potential leaders of the Conservative Party chomping at the bit to get their hands on the reins, then there would be some fairly serious questions being asked about his position. I don't know what the precedent is. I don't know what the constitutional scenario is about a pre-election change of jockey, but no one would want the job now. I mean, literally nobody would want. It would be like changing manager when you're 14-0 down at half time. Literally nobody would want to come in to the fray now, and therefore you find yourself wondering whether this does have a long tail, whether this story does last until Monday. Things we would have talked about today if this hadn't happened include Frank Hester, The Guardian reporting yet more evidence of his misogyny and or racism, including describing one staff member as the token Muslim, imitating people of Chinese descent in sort of work meetings, and remarking that one individual was attractive for a black woman. This according to former employees who spoke to The Guardian. The Liberal Democrats, I presume somewhat mischievously, have suggested that Rishi Sunak give the latest £5 million donation that they've accepted from the racist businessman Frank Hester to a veterans charity, which I think is highly unlikely and possibly not something that they could do without Frank Hester's permission. And the two policy announcements, you could be forgiven for not knowing that both the Labour Party and the Conservative Party were hoping to have talked about today, although I suspect the Labour Party are quite happy with the way that the news agenda has gone, were changes to the child benefit system and attempts to make it easier for young people to get on the property ladder. So that's what the normal election would have sounded like. And it's a mark, perhaps, of just what a big deal this story has become and continues to be, that it's now 12:42 and we haven't talked about anything else since 10 o'clock. My switchboard is still squealing under the strain of all the people ringing in, and our message box, which you can see on my Twitter if you follow me, you can see the what happened to the girl. But that happened when he started apologising, which suggests that in many ways the apology has made everything worse, not better. Notwithstanding, of course, the view that simply by apologising, whether he means it or not, or whether people find it persuasive or not, we should all just shut up and move on. 12:43 is the time. Jules is in Swindon. Jules, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. Thanks for having me on.
You're very welcome.
The interview you played earlier on, the pool interview, where he gave his formal apology, I guess, he referred several times to everything he said. He said several times, but several times, judge me on my record. Judge me on my record. Judge me on my record. And it's not the first time he said that. If you wind back 18 months or so to when he stood in Downing Street and gave his 5 pledges, he said at that time, when he was giving them, before any of them had been missed or achieved or whatever happened with them, he said, you will be able to judge me on how well I perform against these pledges. And then a year later, when the deadline had come up that he set at that time, suddenly it's, we did inflation, and the other ones are all works in progress. We're working really hard.
Inflation, as you know, had nothing to do with him. Because when it went up, it was all to do with international factors. When it came down, it was all down to him.
Absolutely. The thing he doesn't seem to get at all is that why does he think people are so angry about this? It's because they're judging him on his record. His record is everything he's ever done and said, isn't it?
I think
Furlow
is considered to have been. I'm not quite sure what else he could have done, but it is a bit. There's two bits of what you say that resonate with me. The first is it's as if. And someone else made this point about a year ago, that he's never had to deal with failure before. So he doesn't have the vocabulary for it. And this is, failure or wrongdoing or error, however you want to describe it. He doesn't actually have the bandwidth to process it and respond in a human way, which is probably why he sounds robotic, and maybe why, once he's got a kind of reflex response to something, he can't move away from it. But you're right, asking to be judged on my record when he was a crucial part of Boris Johnson's government, of course, up to Chancellor of the Exchequer, and his party have been in power for the last 14 years. If you stop to think about it, it's a very odd flex, isn't it, to say, judge me on my record?
I think that there's something else that I detected in his interview.
Go on.
I don't know if you picked it up or anybody else listening did. He sounded like he was really suppressing anger that he had to justify himself at all.
Who do you think?
Yeah, exactly. Why are you not thinking I'm brilliant and wonderful? I work really hard, therefore I must be good. And I have to say, on some levels, I sympathise with that.
As a human being.
As a human being, because I went through a period of my life. I came up against a brick wall in my career in my 20s, and I'd just thought, I should be promoted. I'm working really hard. Someone should notice me. And it's a failure of management if I don't get promoted out of this job where I'm...
Why can't you see how good I am?
My wheels. Exactly. And I had a lot of conversations with my boss at the time. He used to give me a lift to work. And he said, look, you can't just expect someone to notice it. It isn't the job of management to promote people who are doing well in the job they're in. You have to actually show the will in. You have to stick your hand up and say, yeah, I'll have a go at that. You have to be able to... And I can't help thinking that he's had such a gilded life, and it's gone so straightforwardly. He's done Oxford, he's done sort of merchant banking, and then he went into hedge fundery, and everything that he's touched has turned to gold, including his political career. He only entered Parliament in 2015, and then he's Chancellor by 2020. And 2021. And then Prime Minister without having to actually face...
Yeah, he did get beaten by Liz Truss. I think that was possibly when it was Beth Rigby who asked him about whether or not he'd had any particular experience of failure. But getting beaten by the woman who subsequently got beaten by a lettuce can be easily overcome when you end up with the biggest prize anyway. But since he got the biggest prize, he hasn't shown any particular capability of reflection, really, upon wrongdoing. And yeah, maybe that is because he's never had to do it before. Judge me on my record. A very strange thing to say. The more you think about it, the stranger it becomes. 12:47 is the time. If I had a 4-hour show, and I don't, and Vanessa Feltz is in for Sheila today, actually, so we'll have to wait and see what Vanessa is going to invite you to comment on. But if I had a 4-hour show, I probably would now move towards the question of how big a deal do you think this is? The problem is that we're living in this little period of politics that is odd. I know we've had a lot of elections lately, but we don't normally have more than one every 5 years. And the fact that we're smack in the middle of this campaign, there's less than a month left, means that question assumes a different significance. You know, how big a deal is this? Well, if you're already getting pummeled in the polls, it's hard to imagine that any of the people who are still on your team are going to leave your team. There may be a little bit of movement, possibly further to the right where Farage is waiting, rubbing his thighs, or back towards the middle. I can't see why. Maybe back towards the middle. So I don't know how big a deal it is because of the very specific circumstances in which this has unfolded. But it's fair to say that with a couple of exceptions, the opinion, the public opinion of Rishi Sunak, it is hard to imagine, unless he is filmed secretly barbecuing baby hedgehogs. I can't quite imagine how Rishi Sunak's public opinion of Rishi Sunak right now could get any lower.
James O'Brien on LBC.
12:52 is the time. It's a really nice full disclosure this week. I know I say that every week, but this one is quite a gentle, fun listen. Danny Wallace, who's one of my favourite people in this industry, in this business, we found quite a few little early career crossovers that we didn't know about previously, including the fact that we both cut our teeth on the same rather trendy magazine that has a name I always have to slightly caveat when I say it on the radio by saying it's not what it sounds like, but it was called G-Spot magazine. And then, of course, he's gone on to do all sorts of things. He's a mischief maker. He's essentially a mischief maker, Danny Wallace. And it's led him to being it's led to Hollywood films. We didn't even talk about his appearances in video games, which is probably the thing I'm most envious of. And, of course, works on Radio X now. He's got so much going on. But he was also a very early canary down the coal mine of conspiracy theories and the subsequent proliferation of conspiracy theories and indeed prominence of people who everybody decent should have started ignoring a very, very long time ago, including, of course, Alex Jones, who accused the children murdered at Sandy Hook of being hoaxers and the grieving families of being actors, and on whose Internan programme Nigel Farage appeared at least 6 times. But Danny was wise to Jones's jive quite some time ago.
I mean, I've always had an interest in conspiracy theories and different ways of thinking. And
you interviewed Alex Jones before he was Alex Jones, really?
I interviewed Alex Jones before YouTube existed, which made Alex Jones.
Of course.
I met him, I think, probably just months before YouTube launched, when he was just an angry man shouting in a garage. Or at one point...
living?
Yeah. At one point we were walking down the street, and I still don't know how he did this. We were talking, and in the middle of our conversation, he pulled out a bullhorn from nowhere, a loudhailer, and started screaming at a local politician's house, and then we just carried on walking. I don't know where he got it from. I'm pretty sure he didn't have it when we were in the car.
He keeps it near the house.
Yeah.
He's got them dotted all
just
around
all
town.
over Austin, Texas. Loudhailers left, right, and centre. We got on really well. I found him to be paranoid. He was into his theories about 9/11 being an inside job. And he was finding an audience of largely young men, some of whom would come up to him on the streets and press their hand into his and say, thank you for all you're doing. And these were just people who were listening to public radio, seeing him on late night cable TV, before he was able to invade everybody's house on the planet with his InfoWars shows.
And you've written about it. You made a programme with him then, I think. And what struck...
Not with him. We weren't a double act, you know what I mean?
No, of course.
It's like a quiz show with me and Alex Jones. I interviewed him.
What struck me was that he really did mean it all. And he seemed to mean it all, and at times was upset that you didn't believe him, or that you didn't. You couldn't see the building that looked like an owl.
Yes, he was insistent that there was a building that looked like an owl as a nod to the Bavarian group, the Illuminati, who decided to build owl skyscrapers in America's 11th biggest city in order to show that they were watching us always. And I couldn't really see that, but I'm in an awkward position where a man is really trying to tell me, look. Check it, they look like owls. And I'm like, yeah, that's kind of, but it was exhausting.
There's also a proper scoop in this interview where Danny reveals a role that he's played in I've got political paranoia, so I can't go into too much detail, but there was a sort of guerrilla campaign around dirty water, sewage in waterways, and no one was quite sure where the campaign had started. And, well, if you listen to Full Disclosure, you will know. You will find out. Speaking of campaigns, David Cameron has come out to speak in defence of the man who put him in the House of Lords, Rishi Sunak.
Well, I think it's a tribute to the way he is, that, he thought on reflection he wished he'd stayed in France, and instead of digging in and defending himself, he just came straight out and said, on reflection, I wish I'd stayed longer. But to be fair, he was at the Portsmouth event with all the veterans, gave a brilliant speech. He was at the event, the British event, at our brand new built commemorative centre above Gold Beach in Normandy, where he was with the veterans, gave a fantastic speech. He always represents our country very well abroad, and he had a long-standing plan to return after that, and we are in the middle of an election campaign, so that's not surprising. But then, on reflection, he said he wished he had stayed for the later event, and I think that's a credit to him that he's been so frank about it.
Yeah, well, big one, Dave. It's good. It's played a blinder, Rishi Sunak. I think we can all agree that this is a sparkling bit of evidence about what a stand-up guy he really is. I mean, there are days, aren't there, where you have to feel sorry for the satirists. So what the hell do they do when reality keeps delivering this sort of content? Dennis is in God's own country, Brentford. What's it going to be, Dennis? What would you like to say?
Well, to continue the lighter note, I was just thinking about the next Labour campaign poster. You're going to have a picture of Schultz, Macron, Biden, and then an outline of, say, an average 12-year-old boy with the tagline underneath, missing in action, vote Labour.
That's quite strong, isn't it? Well, I mean, a silhouette type. I mean, you don't have to make light of his height, Dennis. I'd like to think we're all better than that. But yeah, I mean, we'll probably not let this go, because why would you?
Well, everything's fair in love and war. When he comes back, gives a half-arse apology, and really what he wants to do is double down on this £2,000 tax over 4 years. The gloves are off.
Proven lie. But yeah, no,
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't know that we've made enormous amounts of progress into working out what was going on in the room where it happens, or indeed the machinations of Rishi Sunak and his advisors, senior, junior, or somewhere in the middle there. But I mean, you have to say, I think there's going to be a press call this afternoon. Is there? Are we hearing that? He's going to. I see the press call this afternoon was on a street called Veterans Way. Good Lord, the story just gets better and better. If you missed any of today's show, you can listen back on Catch Up on Global Player, the official LBC app, where you can also pause and rewind live radio, including, as I mentioned a while ago, that apology that we played out shortly after the 12 noon news. You can download it now for free from your app store or head to globalplayer.com. Coming up at 4 o'clock on LBC, it's Tom Swarbrick, but now it's time for Vanessa Feltz.
James O'Brien on LBC.